In a city that never sleeps, a lone guitarist makes his leaps. Fingers dance, strings sing a tale of a dream that feels so frail. Echoes fill the silent night. A lost love, a heart so tight. But in this cold, hard world, hope's just a fleeting word. Oh, trees whisper, oh, trees sigh. In the darkness they take flight. Heartbreak echoes, lonely cry. In the cold, hard light, guitar soars through the stormy skies. A melody that pierces the eyes. Love's a memory, a distant dream. In this world it seems fingers glide in the fading light. A final note, a last good night. Lost in the shadows, lost in time. Dreams are all we find. Oh, dreams whisper, oh, dreams sigh. In the darkness they take flight. Heartbreak echoes, a lonely cry. In the cold, hard light.
In the shadows where whispers dwell,
1.3.
slight guitar sings of love's farewell.
10-4, I just wanted to know if
Echoes of a heart once bold, now lost in the night's cold fold. Secrets hidden deep within, tales of love that couldn't win. Promises made in moonlight's glow, now broken like a shattered show. Sorrow in the guitar's cry, resilience in the sky. Through the night we'll find our way, carrying secrets, holding on today. Memories of laughter and tears, in the silence they appear. Whispers of a time so true, when love was all we knew. Lost in the echoes of the past, wishing for what we had. In the dark we search for light, holding on to what we fight. Through the pain, through the night, we find strength in the fight. Sorrow in the guitar's cry, resilience in the sky. Through the night we'll find our way, carrying secrets, again.
21.
Target card for a parking problem.
Foreigner 23.
This is Foreigner 28 from Hunt. Truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Hey guys, good evening. This looks kind of dark, doesn't it? Let me see if I can turn the light up a little bit. All right. One of the things that I want to keep mentioning at the top of the show that I forgot to mention the last couple of shows. Let's see if this helps at all. All right. I know people are sick of hearing it, but I want to try to keep saying this as much as possible because I want to beat this drum until someone that matters, a whistleblower within the U.S. Attorney's Office, Leah Foley herself, the new U.S. Attorney, or someone in the media with the guts of a Woodman and Bernstein to actually break a real story. Something smells in what happened under the reign of Josh Levy. There's no question about that. We just don't know exactly what it is. I got fed more information on it today, but it's not something I'm going to talk about tonight. But there's just so many signs. Is the communication, the feds are supposed to be a one-way street when it comes to communication. They get information. They don't give information. But this U.S. Attorney's Office developed close contacts with Karen Reed's defense team. That's improper. The U.S. Attorney himself, Josh Levy, just months before the trial, consulted, basically, over a teleconference call with David Unity and Alan Jackson. And he advised them to get a delay in the trial. Why is a U.S. attorney talking on the phone to a murder defendant's lawyers? That doesn't happen unless something stinks. Why is the U.S. attorney himself, and I've talked to judges, I've talked to FBI agents, nobody can remember, going back decades, any of this ever happening before. A U.S. attorney himself questions, grills witnesses in front of a grand jury. It doesn't happen. This time it did. And it happened late in the game when he certainly knew there was no conspiracy by then. They had all the communications by then, and they knew there was no conspiracy. So it's like he had, at that point, he knew he was duped, and he wanted to avoid embarrassment or had developed such close relationship with Karen's team that at this point, they were just now like Archer or Dr. Russell, they were just on Karen's team. The U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal government, was co-opted by Karen, was duped by this conspiracy theory. Just like Turtle Boy, just like me at some point, just like so many people. The difference is some of us, say like, for instance, me or Matt Doherty from Boundless Millennial, we had the integrity to keep asking questions and figure it out. That's what Turtle Boy lacks. That's what Josh Levy lacks. You don't get integrity from getting an elite education, graduating second at Brown, and becoming partner in Ropes and Gray. Integrity is not one of those things that is a privilege of the rich or a privilege of the privileged. Integrity, you're just as likely to find it with the guy that comes to fix your air conditioner or your plumber, your car mechanic, your police officer. In all those fields, you have people that have integrity and people that don't. And you really don't find out whether someone has integrity. You don't even find out whether yourself have integrity. Everybody thinks they have integrity. If you're in a room of 100 people and you say, who has integrity, raise your hand, they're all going to raise their hand. And you know that half of them don't. You don't find out whether you have integrity until you're tested, until you're facing something where you have to accept something difficult. You have to accept a loss. And you accept it because of integrity. And I'm going to guess that this was the first time in Josh Levy's privileged life that he faced that. And he failed the test. And if there were crimes, they need to be investigated. If there was improper procedure, it needs to be investigated. Now, Josh Levy not only questioned the witnesses, grilling them on the stand. He used Turtle Boy's blog, TB Daily News. knowing. Now, this was done at the exact same time that Turtle Boy was intimidating and hounding those witnesses. And let's not pretend that Josh Levy didn't know about it. These people, Josh Levy he loves to do a press conference. This guy's a media hound. All right. He was certainly following the storm that had been whipped up by Karen's team. I mean, you're gonna tell me that Josh Levy is himself preparing to grill the witnesses in the federal grand jury, and he has no idea that the media storm and the social media storm and all the people out demonstrating, you're going to tell me he has no idea? Bullshit. He knew 100% what was going on. And yet, despite that, he put up a blow-up of TB Daily News to question those witnesses. Why? But the most pertinent question, the key to unlock the entire puzzle, is why doesn't Turtle Boy brag about this? Turtle Boy was his happiest day in his life was when he was the subject of being thrown out of court during the last trial, and trial was delayed by an hour and a half. That was the happiest day of his life. He loves being the center of attention. He will brag about anything. And look, if a U.S. attorney used something that I wrote or something on one of my shows inside a grand jury, I'd be proud. I'd be bragging about it. Why isn't Turtle Boy bragging about it? That's the key question. Somebody doesn't want him bragging. Somebody doesn't want him talking about it. And that someone is able to convince him. Your guess is as good as mine. But if you figure that out, you're going to unlock the mystery as to a big part of the corruption that's going on here. And there's no question that what's going on is corrupt. Just look at also the multiple letters that District Attorney DA Morrissey's office sent first to the U.S. Attorney's office. Find out what was going on. Do you want any evidence? Do you want to cooperate on this? The arrogant federal government, the arrogant U.S. Attorney's office didn't even respond, didn't reply. Just like when Judge Canoni, when this was going on leading up to the trial, and she wanted to know what's going on with this federal investigation. I'm getting ready to set up a trial in my court. What is going on? She kept inviting them to send someone to her court to one of the hearings to explain what was going on. And they just ignored. And it was only when she finally, just a couple weeks before the trial, seemed to be about to grant an amicus request from the Boston Globe to make the federal documents public that had been come over. Finally, now they get a threatening letter from Josh Levy, threatening to take over the trial into federal court. Unbelievable. Constitutional crisis. He was willing to risk, so determined was he to keep his secrets that he's willing to risk a constitutional crisis. Now, there are some big secrets in there that he doesn't want out. This is why long after they stopped doing any investigating, there's no evidence they did any investigating after they questioned Michael Proctor before the federal grand jury last February 1st. So February 1st of 2024. That's it. There's no indication they did any further investigating of anything after that. Yet, as late as January 31st, they were telling the parties that the investigation was officially ongoing. That's what the feds do when they want an excuse to hide. They hide behind that when they don't want their wrongdoing exposed. Look, at the end of the day, the only people that can expose the feds are the feds. They're the highest law of the land. But the only way to make it, a lot of that, the only way the feds will consistently respond to anything is if it's political or if it's driven by headlines. So if the Trump administration can find some political hay in exposing what Josh Levy did, maybe they'll pursue it. But, it's a long shot because Trump's going to look at this and say 80% of the people believe Karen's innocent, so it might be a political loser. So I wouldn't count on the Trump administration trying to get to the bottom of this. But the next thing is headlines. This is the most important thing. The feds respond to headlines. That's the thing they care most about in the world is headlines. Reading them, making them. When I talked to Rachel Rollins explained that district attorney's offices are reactive. Someone gets killed, you got to do an investigation. However, the feds, the U.S. Attorney's Office, she said, is not like that. It's proactive. They're looking at headlines and deciding based on headlines what they want to investigate. Very different, right? So they are a headline group, and they're very ambitious. These are some of the most powerful, ambitious people. The people that work as assistant U.S. attorneys, they came from the best schools. They have the most context. It's privilege. There's a lot of ambition in there. Josh Levy very, very badly wanted to be U.S. attorney. And when Biden was elected, he managed to get his name on the list. And there were 4 names on the list. One of them was his. The other one was Rachel Rollins, a rising star in the Democratic Party. Very much, Rachel Rollins was very much what the type of person that the Biden administration was looking for. So Levy reached out to Rachel Rollins and tried to get her to drop out. He wanted that job bad, and he seemed to be conspiring to get it from the moment he walked through the door. And he walked through the door at the same time as Rachel Rollins. He came in as first assistant U.S. attorney, which is kind of similar to her chief of staff. He decides what matters go to her attention and what matters don't. Now, there's no indication that he brought anything to do with the Karen Reed case to her attention. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. It seems to be this was his baby, though. He was the one that Karen Reed and her team got the meeting with. Now, you and I can't get a meeting. If we're accused of murder, we cannot get a meeting with the first U.S. attorney. Karen was very excited about that. I've seen the messages when this happened in August of 2022, when she sent Natalie messages bragging about this. She sent her a flow shot showing how high up on the food chain Josh Levy was. And she said something like, the feds don't swing and miss. In other words, this is it. So Karen was really celebrating that day. How did they get that meeting? What connection was it? We've always assumed that maybe it was David Yannetti. David Yannetti was a prosecutor at Suffolk County in Boston for many years. So, he knows a lot of people. But it might not have been. Alan Jackson was brought on the team just a month before. Alan Jackson has a lot of connections. He has close connections to the feds in Los Angeles. So Alan Jackson's brought in July, and then a month later, they get a meeting in the U.S. Attorney's Office with a high-ranking first assistant U.S. attorney. Is that coincidence? Maybe not. Another possibility is the fact that Rachel Rollins has said that in her estimate, about 30% of the assistant U.S. attorneys in the U.S. Attorney's Office had worked for Ropes and Gray. So this is a very elite law firm. And this is where Josh Levy had become a partner. So there's a revolving door between these Ropes and Gray people and some other powerful institutions, including the U.S. Attorney's Office, and including this one figure that we may reveal tomorrow, who was high up at Fidelity, where Karen worked, and then was high up, or is now currently high up at Ropes and Gray. A lot of connections here, right? So is that how she gets the meeting? We don't know, and it shouldn't be up to me. I'm just a YouTuber. It should be the Boston Globe investigating this. It should be Christina Rex. It should be Ted Daniels. It should be Fox News. Are there any real journalists left in the world that are willing to take a risk to go digging into something very important? Are there any of you guys left? If any of you guys are listening to this channel, any of you guys left? I'm wondering where you are. Where's your courage? Where's your integrity? Pursue this. I can't call up the U.S. Attorney's Office and say, "Oh yeah, this is Kevin Lenihan. I run a YouTube channel called Yellow Cottage Tales." That doesn't get me in the door. But if you're Christina Rex and you call up and you say, "I work for WBZ and I have questions," they're going to respond. If you're Ted Daniels and calls up, they're going to respond. And the more you start digging, they're going to pay attention. And they're going to be worried. All I can do is bang the alarm and hope that somebody listens. I'm banging it from a little tiny yellow cottage in the woods, and I'm hoping that some people in the nearby medieval village, somebody in the castle, somebody with power, or somebody that lives near the castle will pick that up, and they'll go banging at the door on the castle and trying to figure out what happened. That's all I can do. All right, but there's corruption here. Now there are signs that Leah Foley might be trying to do the right thing and come clean here, but we don't know. We don't really know what's going on, the dynamics of that office. We don't know. All right. Enough on that. So tomorrow the trial starts, and our usual team will be here. Myself, Kate, Jen, and Matt. Maybe Drunken Turkeys, and occasionally Tuesday Gazette's going to show up. And I'm not sure if I've forgotten anybody. But so that the trial continues during the week. Thursday and Friday, I will not be here. I begin my medical treatments, and but Kate's going to run it. So you'll be able to get the stream from Yellow Cottage Tales. She has my login for it, or from her channel, Mass Hole Mafia, or from Jen's Breaking the Case with Jen Coffeneffer, or from Matt's Boundless Millennial. So you'll be able to find it, and it'll be covered in the same way that we do here. When there's actually something going on in the trial, we get off the screen, and all you see is the trial. So, oh, this banner was made for something else. Let me just, all right. So today I want to do a couple things. I want to go over an article by Anonymous Mass Lawyer that's one of his better ones. And they're all pretty good, but this is one of his better ones. So, let me see if I lost this. I got to find it again. Damn. All right. Hold on 1 second. I had opened it and then I accidentally closed it. What he does is he goes back to Turtle Boy's very first article on this case on April 18th. So this was the 2-year anniversary of that. And this is Turtle Boy, who I guess he's now saying he deserves a Pulitzer. This guy, he's about as much in touch with reality as Grant Smith. All right, here it is. And then after that, I'm going to do something. I'm not going to overdo it. Don't worry. But I want to go over. I found it interesting. So the other day, I started listening to Adam Lally's opening statements, and so we're gonna go back and listen to the beginning, but we're not going to listen to the whole thing. But what can we learn? What more importantly can Hank Brennan learn? I'm sure he has watched it. He's not watching this channel, but are there something on the chance that he can't sleep late at night and he puts on this channel to go see it? Might we find some things that we can point out? Things that Lally did well or things that he didn't do well? So if there's something he did well, then Hank can say, oh, yeah, I should do that. And if it's something that wasn't well, Hank can say, all right, I need to not do it quite that way. So we're going to do that. Let me first go to Anonymous's article. All right. So it's titled Revisiting the Birth of FKR. Yesterday, Aidan Turtleboy Kearney celebrated the anniversary of the birth of the Free Karen Reed movement with this post on Twitter. Turtleboy says, 2 years ago today, I broke the story that I thought would be pretty big and would end within a week. Did he really think it was going to end within a week? I don't think so. Why would he think that? That nobody thought this story was going to end within a week. That's a crazy thing to say. 2 years later, he says, we're still here gearing up for trial number 2. So he goes back to his tweet from, from that year, from 4/18/23. A Boston cop was murdered by another Boston Police Department, BPD, from a family of cops and politicians in Canton. They immediately began plotting to frame an innocent woman with the assistance of a corrupt state trooper and who is being charged with manslaughter. That was really poorly worded, Turtle Boy. I don't think that's Pulitzer material, but all right. So Anonymous continues, as I noted in response, it's actually a useful exercise to go back now and reread his original article from April 18th. If you're at all familiar with the actual facts and evidence of this case, what immediately stands out, in addition to the terrible prose, is how little of the content of that piece has held up to scrutiny. It's absolutely riddled with falsehoods and debunked claims. Indeed, the fact that Aiden is still super proud of this hackish collage of libelous nonsense is the definitive proof that he is not a journalist. Any actual journalists would be mortified that they'd ever put their name on something so amateurish and so grossly inaccurate. And I can speak to that. So I've gone back, and I don't never called myself a journalist, but I've gone back and looked at some of my earlier reporting on this, and there were some you look at, you say, all right, that was pretty good, and then other things you say like, Eesh, you have to kind of second guess yourself, and some of the things you got wrong, you say, okay, now I know why I got this wrong at least. Anyways, so but yeah, you have to be honest when you look back at your old work and look at your mistakes too. See if you've grown, see if you've improved at all. All right. There are way too many falsehoods in the piece to comprehensively catalog all of them, but I thought it would be worth a few moments to revisit its core narrative and see how well it's held up. After a rather long setup, Aiden eventually gets to the heart of the story. When he, John O'Keefe, entered 34 Fairview, he was surprised to see 18-year-old Colin Albert was there, who confronted him at some point and hit him. Our sources believe that Brian Albert joined in on the beating, alarming his loyal German Shepherd, which immediately began to tear into John O'Keefe's arm. Despite being their family dog, Brian Albert got rid of her and never explained where the dog went. I mean, all of that. Well, I'll take it apart before we continue with the article. There's no evidence Colin Albert was in the house at that time, and that's why this is. If there was even a little bit of evidence, Judge Canoni would have allowed them to use this, because as she said, she allowed them to use third-party culprit on Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, or allowed to develop that line. But she even said it was really thin. There is no evidence tying Colin to anything. This was just a defense theory that they put out there. Why? Because they're taking bits and pieces of things, of information, and trying to create, might be a better word, a counter narrative. And when you create these counter narratives, you have to look for things like means and motive. Motive is a big part of it, right? So why would Michael, so right from the get-go here, from the beginning, the only way Karen could be innocent is if she was framed. The only way she could be framed was if Michael Proctor, at the very least, was part of that framing. And Michael Proctor would have no motive to do that. There's no connection between Michael Proctor and Brian Albert or Brian Higgins. But having Colin Albert is a little bit useful there, because at least they were able to find some connection on Facebook where Colin and Proctor were once in the same wedding party. Or at a pool party or something like that. So at least there's a tenuous connection there. That's the best they could find. So that's the only reason Colin is thrown into this, is because they need to give Proctor a motive. It's that simple. If it wasn't for that, if Michael Proctor's sister, Courtney, wasn't close friends with Colin Albert's mom, then poor Colin never would have got inserted into this story. Never. There's no reason to put him there. All right. Needless to say. Actually, I'm sorry. There was a few things. Let's see. Our sources believe that Brian joined in on the beating. All right. John was not in a fight. Now, at the absolute most you could speculate was that John was whacked on the back of the head as he came through the door. But he was not in a fight. Now, trust me. I've been in fights. I've broken up a lot of fights. I know enough about fights from my work in the bar industry for 20 years. And John was not in a fight. There's no abrasions on his hands. There's no split lip. There's no split eye. There's no broken nose. There's nothing on him that looks like he's been in a fight. There's the swollen eyes, but we now know the medical explanation for that, and it has nothing to do with being struck. Now, if you don't believe me, because I'm just a bartender, well, I don't blame you. But the medical examiner and the hospital doctors, all the staff, they are experts, and they all said, no, this guy was not in a fight. All right, so he got that wrong. Alarming his loyal German. I mean, it's just speculation, right, about the German Shepherd. And despite being their family dog, Brian got rid of her and never explained where the dog went. Well, we now know that explanation. The dog got out a couple of months after John's death. The dog got out of the house when it saw somebody else walking another dog, a neighbor, and it attacked that dog. And that's how dogs are. Our dog is never get out of the house, but he looks out the window too, and he gets very agitated by dogs that are being walked by someone else. So I could picture it happening here too. And the owner of the other dog, when she tried to break up the fight, got bit. And that's how it happens when you try to break up a dog fight. You're going to get bit, no matter how much that dog loves you. Look at what happened to Drunken Turkey's Daniel. He had a horrible wound on his arm, and that was his dog. And the two dogs were fighting, and he broke it up, and that's how he got hurt. So there is an explanation. You know, people don't have to accept the explanation, but there is an explanation. And if you were trying to get rid of Chloe in order to, because you were afraid of evidence coming out down the road about the attack, and you didn't want, I guess, because you didn't want somebody to get Chloe's DNA or get dental impressions. Well, wouldn't you kill Chloe then? Wouldn't you kill Chloe and throw her in the woods somewhere? You know, why would you, if you've made that command decision that you've committed a murder and now everything hinges on this cover up and you're not going to make any mistakes and you're a thorough cop, wouldn't you get rid of Chloe in a way that she's never going to be found? But that's not what happened. Chloe was rehomed. All right. So Anonymous responds to this by saying, needless to say, none of this has held up at all. There has never been any evidence offered that Colin Albert was in the house or had any conceivable motive. And as a result, the defense is now precluded from even arguing this at trial. Moreover, the uncontested GPS evidence proves that O'Keefe's phone never went inside 34 Fairview. And this is pretty much uncontested. The defense did not challenge the accuracy of the locationality of that data. They just challenged the clock, which is ridiculous too. GPS, it depends on accurate clocks, but they really couldn't challenge it. You try to hint vague things about saying, "Wow, it's not very accurate. It had bad signal in that area." It's irrelevant because we always know from second to second what the signal strength was. So they really couldn't argue it. John's phone never went in the house. That's just one of those things where you go, period. So that means John's phones never went up and down stairs, never took 116 steps. That's just bulletproof. That's beyond. So to believe that, you just aren't really able to process evidence well. I'm sorry to say. All right. So he says, as for Chloe the German Shepherd, the evidence at trial showed that she was rehomed after an incident with another dog several months later. Like I said, yeah. And that the defense has known her whereabouts since well before the first trial. Indeed, Hank Brennan has been able to obtain a mold of her mouth, as the defense always could have if they wanted to. Aiden continues from this is again from his article, from his very first article on this. Additionally, O'Keefe's, do I have to do a Turtle Boy voice? I can't do that squeaky voice. Additionally, O'Keefe's phone tracked him walking up and down the stairs inside, Brian Albert's home from 12:20 to 12:32. This is, it's amazing that Turtle Boy reported that, because that's not even what Rich Green reported. Rich Green reported, I don't have it in front of me, but it was like 12:20 and something seconds to 12:22 and maybe 20 seconds. I'm probably off a few seconds like that, but it's in the range of 12:20 and 12:24. Rich Green never said 12:32 that's when the stair climbing took place. Obviously, Turtle Boy continues. Obviously, it would not show this sort of up and down motion if he was inside Karen Reed's car or lying on the ground outside the house. Well, you know, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I can only say, for instance, my sister last summer was, as they do, driving around slowly around the Cape with her husband, looking at homes and cottages along the shore, sightseeing. And, they go slow and they stop to look at things. And probably because of this case, my sister opened up her health app and she found on her phone that it was indicating that she was going up and down stairs. So if you're not driving very normally, like you might not be if you're sightseeing. So my theory is that Trooper Garino pointed out where the vehicle was. It was on Maplecroft Road or something like that, which leads to Cedar Crest, which leads to Fairview. And it was on a certain part of Maplecroft that's where Rich Green, that's when the health app says that the stair climbing began. So I think that they got to the intersection of Maplecroft and Cedar Crest. And to go to Fairview, they have to go right. But if they're going to go home, they go left, and it goes right back to Dedham Street, which it's a main road that would take you home. So they probably stopped there and argued. And listen, we can all, granted, Karen and John are a little old for this, but we all remember in our 20s getting into these kind of late night arguments with your girlfriend. And after you've been drinking. And so you can picture it. She wants to go home. He wants to go to the party. Man, I swear I've been in a similar situation many times before back in the day. And so they probably stopped at that intersection. Very similar to, say, like my sister and her husband stopping to look at a house as they're sightseeing. And so all this tends to trick the algorithms. The health app doesn't really know what you're doing. It doesn't have a drone flying around watching you. So it's trying to interpret what you're doing from several signals. And it's amazing that they're even able to make any kind of determination. But one of the things that it measures is motion. So when you go up and down stairs, you get a certain motion, whether your phone's in your pocket or in your hand. You get a unique rhythm to your motion. Well, you can duplicate that by, if you're talking, like if you're animated. So if, let's say, you're in an argument with someone and you're talking with your hands and you got your phone in your hands. So there's different things that can go into it. But whatever the case was, at the time when that health app says John was going up and down stairs, he could not have been, because not only does GPS, but Waze and other data indicators show that they were on the way there. We know what time they went by the Jewish temple, because that camera picked them up. And that time corroborates the time that moments later John put 34 Fairview into his Waze. So it's accurate. This idea of trying to bring up it was desperation that the defense tried to say, wow, that clock might have been 3 minutes off. No. It's nuts. So at the time when Rich Green or the health app says that John was going up and down stairs, they were in the car on their way to 34 Fairview. And we know this. We know what time they arrived. We know what time that Ricky D'Antonio's truck with Ryan Nagel arrived. Okay? Because he texted his sister from Cedar Crest Street. So there's just so many data lines here that absolutely debunk even the possibility that John's phone was going up and down stairs at that period. It's completely debunked with certainty. And the only people that don't believe that just don't want to. The conspiracy theory is too juicy and they don't want to let it go. Is what it is. And all right, so let's go back to Anonymous. He writes much better than me, so I'm sorry to keep interrupting Anonymous. Again, the evidence shows that the phone never went inside the house at all, so it couldn't have been recording steps in there. Moreover, as we know, this timeline is all wrong. The phone data shows that O'Keefe didn't even pull up to 34 Fairview until 12:24. And actually, it was a little bit after that. So they took the turn onto Fairview from Cedar Crest at 12:24 and 18 seconds. And so probably, and they're going slow, looking for 34. It's a couple houses on the right. So they probably didn't pull up until in front of the house until at least 12:24 and 30 seconds. And then only about 10 seconds later, I don't have the numbers in front of me, they already had pulled up to the far edge of the property. So they pulled up in front of the driveway and stopped there for seconds, 8 to 10 seconds. And probably Karen saw the pickup truck pull up behind them. And so she thought maybe they were in the way, or maybe because they were arguing and she wanted to go home. So they pulled up to the far edge of the property right away. There was no stair climbing. And and he mentions that the prosecution has evidence that he didn't get out of the SUV until 12:30. Now, I don't really know what this evidence is yet. So people have been saying that the seatbelt that Hank Brennan said at a hearing that the seatbelt was undone at 12:30 or 12:31. I don't remember seeing that in the hearing, and I've talked to some other people, and they don't either. So I'm wondering at this point that might just be. It can happen. Somebody gets something wrong, and it gets repeated, like in the game of telephone down the line. I think that I suspect. So if anybody can find that clip, here's a homework assignment, guys. No, but this would really help us. If anybody can find that clip of Hank Brennan saying that the seatbelt was undone at 12:31, I'd really appreciate it. That would help us because I'm not sure that he actually. I don't remember him saying that. And I probably, unless something was distracting me like the phone, I would have picked up on that right away because the timeline is my thing, as you guys know. That's the thing that I follow the most. Everything that indicates the timeline. I paid attention to all those. When you follow something so deeply like this for so long, you pay attention to little things during the trial that other people might not. For example, early in the trial, last trial, when they showed Officer Saraf's dash cam video of him arriving to the scene, I was making a note to study the size of the plow banks because I wanted to get an indication, was the street plowed? And could we tell from that what time it had been plowed? How big were those snow banks? That made a difference also in terms of the evidence that was buried in there, which was John's sneaker and several of the taillight pieces, including the main one that they found at 5:45. All right. Anonymous continues in describing the aftermath of this supposed murder. Aiden continues. So this is Aiden now. Jennifer McCabe cell phone analysis shows that she left Albert's house at 1:47 a.m. and intentionally chose to drop off to two people who live close to the O'Keefe in the middle of a snowstorm so that she could drive by his house and see if Karen Reed was there. That probably didn't sound much like Turtle. Sorry. I'm not that good at impersonations. So Anonymous points out, so that he claimed by 1:47, McCabe was already plotting to frame Karen. But why? He makes some great logical points here. These are the kind of points that Free Karen Reed people don't ask and Turtle Boy doesn't ask. They're incapable of asking it. So this is why I like his articles. I like his way of thinking. I've tried to do the same kind of thinking myself since the beginning, and other people here in our chat do too. And but when you see other people doing it, they may ask a different question that you didn't think of. So it's very good. So he wants to know why McCabe was already plotting to frame Karen at 1:47. Because at that point, Karen hasn't even driven into her John's Traverse. So that her taillight in this theory isn't cracked yet, right? So why would they even be thinking that? So in this reality, he says, Karen's SUV had no damage yet. So why would it have even occurred to anyone that they could somehow blame John's beat down dog attack on Karen? I mean, it's true, right? Why doesn't Turtle Boy ask this question? Because he's not after the truth, and he's really not that rigorous a thinker. He should have asked that question if it made sense when they tried to pitch it to him. You know, the idea. So they obviously sold him on this idea. Karen did, and Jackson and Yeti, because they were all on the phone with him in those days, and they sold him on this idea that the only reason Karen gave Sarah Nagel and Julie Nagel and Sarah Levinson a ride home was so they could drive by and check to see what was up with Karen. Was she at home? Was she parked in the driveway? It's unbelievable. They're trying to turn Jen McCabe into Lex Luthor. There is no Lex Luthor in the world. That's a comic book. Okay? And so if you find your theory relies on turning a real human being into a comic book figure, you might want to rethink it. All right. In this reality, Karen's SUV had no damage yet, so why would it even have occurred to anyone that they could somehow blame John's beat down dog attack on Karen? So if you got someone that's just been beat up and mauled by a dog, who is going to have the idea, hey, why don't we, and they're all drunk, right? But someone say, hey, why don't we blame it on why don't we somehow make it seem like the girlfriend backed into her, backed into John? That's crazy. Normal people don't believe this. Normal, intelligent people do not believe this. Nan Gallagher, do you believe that? I bet you do. And McCabe's plan here, Anonymous goes on, was to drive home some random teenagers so she'd have an excuse to later explain her GPS data. Why not just turn off location? All right, so what Turtle Boy was saying was that Karen gave them a ride home because she knew later on the police might have her phone. And she wanted to drive by John's house, but didn't want that data to show up. See what I mean? Like Lex Luthor, she's that brilliant. Are you kidding me? I'm sure she's a smart woman. Nobody's that brilliant. No criminal in history has ever orchestrated anything that brilliant, except TV heroes, TV villains. So Turtle Boy continues with the story. At 2:23 a.m., her Apple Watch recorded her going to her bedroom and immediately Googling how long to die in the cold. I'm not sure why it's not 2:27, but I guess it's 2:23 she goes to bed and 2:27 she Googles it. I don't know. Despite previously telling police that she assumed O'Keefe had gone home and read. So Anonymous says, as I've explained previously, the 227 Google search is the beating heart of the conspiracy theory. Without it, this scatterbrained article would largely have been ignored, and the free FKR movement never would have taken off. And I agree with that. I mean, I read this article, saw some odd things, but also asked a lot of questions that this whole conspiracy didn't really make sense. But in my ignorance, I thought that this data was just data and it wasn't in dispute. We didn't know it was in dispute until the state said that at the hearing in maybe June, when Larry said they had an independent data expert that explained that it did not take place at 227. But at the time of reading Turtle Boy's article, I was like, wow, there's no innocent explanation for somebody like Jen making that search at 227. And it just coincidentally, her friend is either already out dying in the cold or soon will be. There's no innocent explanation. So for me, and I still say that, if Jen McCabe actually made that search at 227, then yes, there's a conspiracy. But we know that it didn't happen. But that was the key to getting everybody fired up. He goes on. I'm not going to waste words here rehashing the technical explanation for why this search never happened, though it has been completely and thoroughly debunked. But it's worth reiterating that the narrative itself never made any sense. Why would Jen McCabe Google this just after looking at high school basketball standings? I think maybe it was 8th grade basketball standings, but we get the point. And just before going to bed. Remember, per this theory, John wasn't even out in the cold yet. So she was just curious how long it would eventually take him to die once her family dragged him, still breathing, outside in the snow. Why did people ever believe this, Anonymous asks? It's a real question. Why did anybody ever believe this? Look, the way I've put it is this way too. So as the theory evolved, it was that, so remember, Lucky testified that he didn't see a body at 2:30, Lucky the plow driver. So the theory evolved, and he became a key witness for him, that the killers didn't put John out until sometime after Lucky plowed, so sometime after 3. And that would mean when Jen made this search that John was not outside, or at least not out in the front yard anyways. And so this would mean that the killers would have had to tell her that their plan was to wait a couple hours and then drag John out into the snow onto their own lawn, still alive. And so Jen would have to know that the plan was to take him out alive, because that's what her search was. How long does it take to die? So she's not talking about. So she wasn't thinking they're going to drag a dead body out. And it makes no sense. Like, if your purpose of putting John out to die in the cold is so he won't talk and to save your ass that way, well, why don't you just make sure you kill him first? Do the Tony Soprano thing when he killed Christopher, and he just, covered his air passages, so you're not going to leave any evidence, and John dies, and then you put the body out there. Why wouldn't they do that? Right? None of this makes sense. It's not normal to believe in any of this shit. And then you come back, but what about butt dials? I don't care about butt dials. If this shit doesn't make sense, you have to keep asking questions, and butt dials mean something else. All right. Let's continue. But I want to reiterate. Let's even highlight this here. I have a highlight program. All right. Why did people ever believe this? That's the question that is going to linger through the ages from this case. Why did people ever believe this? It's very similar to the Salem witches. You go back and look at it, it's a hysteria. And just a couple years later, the whole state was like, why did people believe in this? And they had to pay restitution to the people that had been victims, to their families. And for 3 centuries, people have been asking, why did people fall for the Salem witch hysteria? Now, this is not going to be talked about for centuries, but certainly for years, people are going to be saying, why did people ever believe this? Why did intelligent people believe this? And not all of them are intelligent, but when you some of them people are fairly intelligent and they fall for it, and you have to say, well, is there a problem with their critical thinking? Or is the problem that they had something about this case resonated with them so much that it made their normal critical thinking skills be suspended? It's kind of like with the Black Lives Matter movement. So if you're buying into the idea that the police are systematically trying to exterminate black people, then when you have a shooting, before you even get to look at the specific circumstances, you've already made up your mind, because it fits into a narrative that you've bought into, a larger narrative. So I remember when that was going on, maybe a month or so after George Floyd was killed, there was another case. I forget what state it was. And the police responded to a call. And as the white officer was getting out of the car, it was in a black neighborhood, and these 2 black women were in an argument. And one of the black women was about 300 pounds, and the other black woman was about 100 pounds. And the one that was 300 pounds was upset. And as the police were walking towards them, she pulled out a butcher knife and thrust it at the chest of the skinny girl. And the officer, amazingly, had his gun out and fired enough shots to perfect shots, save the girl's life. But unfortunately killed the heavy girl. But because people already had this narrative about the police executing people, automatically, so many people like, it's another killing. I think LeBron James said that. It's another extermination by the police. But that cop saved, with incredibly heroic actions, the other girl. And that's all it was. And you could and it was on video. You could see it. But yet still, even though you can see it, and another one was in the riots after the George Floyd thing, where I forget that kid. It was 18-year-old kid who shouldn't have been out there. He's out there with some kind of long arm weapon, a rifle or something, and medical kits, and he's out washing graffiti off the walls. He's in his mind, he's trying to be a hero. He's a kid trying to be a hero, but a kid trying to be a hero out in the middle of a riot with a gun, bad idea. But the rioters started chasing him down, and eventually this one guy, who was a real badass dude with a long record, was really trying to get to him. And I can't remember this kid's name, but he's running away. And At the last second, he turns around before the other guy gets him and he shoots the guy in self-defense. Now, I don't want to argue about whether that kid should have been charged or what he should have been charged with or whether he was guilty or whether he was, that doesn't matter. The point is that the media and not just the media, the prosecutor in that case told the jury that what they were going to see was this guy chase down the protester and shoot him in cold blood. Now, surely the prosecutor had seen the video, and the video shows the opposite. The video shows that kid being chased down and then turning around at the last second and shooting in self-defense. And it's just amazing because people had all the media. I remember the New York Times when I had seen that footage that was shot by a news helicopter not in the days after it happened. And I knew that kid had shot down someone in self-defense. And yet the media was saying the opposite. They kept going with that story that he had chased somebody down and shot him in cold blood. The New York Times, after that opening day in the trial, when they saw that video, was stunned. They're like, they didn't understand how the prosecutor could describe it one way and the video would show the opposite. But yet that video had been public for like 2 years, and the New York Times never looked at it, never questioned it, because they had their narrative. Their narrative was, it's all about that this kid was a white racist vigilante that was exterminating black people. And the narrative. So this is what goes on sometimes when people buy into something against all evidence. So some of that, I think, affects some people here with the Karen Read case. They already think that police are corrupt, or they already think that women are victims, or whatever their major narrative is that resonates in this case. And so instead of sitting there and looking at this case in isolation and looking at the actual evidence, they've already fitted into a larger worldview, a larger picture. And that's unfortunate. That's more than unfortunate. That's dangerous. All right. So back to the article. When we then flash forward to the next morning when Reed called McCabe, Aiden writes, somehow Jen anticipated this happening, Karen calling her, despite having no idea that O'Keefe was missing. McCabe waited up for Reed because she needed to be with her when Reed discovered the body so that she could control the narrative with police, and she needed to put the idea in Karen's head that she might have accidentally hit and killed O'Keefe while driving drunk and had no recollection of it. Karen truly believes she might have done this and was distraught. His body was staged at the exact place where she was seen doing a 3-point turn. Again, this is one of the, if you want to buy my book, Storm of Suspicion, in there I talk about a lot of what I call general rules that I've developed in my brief time of studying true crime. And maybe you'll find those interesting or not. That's up to you. But one of the rules that I've talked about is, maybe you've heard me talk about it on the channel. It's YCT rule number 1. There are no geniuses. There are no geniuses. And the flip side of that is there are no idiots. So if you have somebody in your theory, if your theory requires the presence of a genius, rethink it. And if it requires the presence of a complete idiot. Most of us are just normal people. And in these situations, like a crime, especially if there's, Jen McCabe has no criminal history. She's not. So this would be her first crime, right? So her first crime, and she's already acting like the most brilliant criminal genius in the history of true crime. You might want to rethink that. But Turtle doesn't ask those kind of questions because he's not after the truth. All right. All he saw was opportunity here. That simple. So let's go back. So Anonymous says the word somehow is doing some heroic work in this part of the story. It reminds me of somehow Palpatine has returned. So this is probably a male, and it's Anonymous and a Star Wars fan. All right. Where was the somehow? Yeah. So going back to, Turtle Boy had said somehow Jen anticipated this happening, Karen calling her, despite having no idea that O'Keefe was missing. There's no evidence she waited up for McCabe. That was a ridiculous thing that they put in the article, too. All right. Jen somehow anticipated that Karen would call her, despite the fact that Karen didn't even have Jen's phone number. Remember, Karen had to ask John's niece to call Jen that morning because she didn't know the number. And yet the conspirators' plan hinged on this call happening. So their whole conspiracy hinged on Karen waking up at some point in the morning, seeing John missing, and deciding to call Jen for help. They could not know that Karen would do that. Because again, Karen didn't have Jen's number. So why would you think that Karen would do that? Why wouldn't she call someone else? So why wouldn't she call 911? Why wouldn't she go back to the scene by herself? You know, and maybe she did, but so it's a foolish plan. So you're trying to turn Jen McCabe into the arch villain of all time, but two, even then, it's a plan that doesn't really make sense. So, all right, and how exactly was Jen supposed to convince Karen that she'd hit John if Karen saw John go inside the house, as she has now told the world several times? So, I mean, a lot of people have made this point. Jen is supposed to be the Karen whisperer. Her job is to sit there like Hannibal Lecter, who got Miggs in the next cell to swallow his tongue. She's so brilliant. She's going to convince Karen that maybe she did it. It's crazy. Also, note the conspirators allegedly staged the body in the place where Karen had done a 3-point turn, even though Karen has since denied ever doing a 3-point turn or going in reverse at all. Well, Karen did say to the state police that morning that she did a 3-point turn, but her story changes depending on the need. Let's continue with Turtle Boy's story. He says, this is Turtle Boy, despite barely knowing Karen Reed, McCabe gleefully jumped in the car with her and Kerry Roberts. This intentional delay guaranteed that O'Keefe would be dead by the time anyone found him, and he would be unable to tell the real story about what happened. Well, if you want to make sure he's dead, make sure he's dead before you put him outside, right? Isn't that the smarter way to go? I mean, especially during a snowstorm when the plow driver's going up and down the street, you put him out alive, Lucky sees him and he gets saved, right? So wouldn't it be a better plan to kill him? It's absurd. The allegation here, I think, is that Jen was stalling for time by suggesting that they first go to One Meadows and that if they'd gone straight to 34, John might have lived. None of this makes any sense, of course, but even in this fictional narrative, how would that additional 30 minutes have mattered? And why would Jen have thought it would matter? Who communicated to her that she needed to buy them more time? How did that communication happen? Remember, they have Jen's phone. Next comes one of my favorite lines from the entire piece. Turtle Boy says, remember that Jennifer McCabe initially told investigators that Karen Reed brought in a drink from another bar to the waterfall, which only a drunken, low-class individual would do. I remember when Turtle Boy had his crushing days, and he had a crush on Karen, and he would say stuff like that on his show all the time. And well, we know that Karen did take a drink from C.F. McCarthy's, and this high-class person was text flirting with Brian Higgins. So, you want to put this woman up on some kind of saintly pedestal. I don't know. So he says, of course, we know this video that now proves she did this. Yeah. The best line, however, is the next one, referring to killing John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe, Aiden writes, Karen was well off and classy. It would never do such a thing. Nevertheless, McCabe successfully planted the seed in Reed's brain that she may have accidentally killed O'Keefe. My God, there's 100 crazy things that all have to have taken place in order for this conspiracy theory to hold up. And each one of them is absurd. Do you actually believe out there, if you're free Karen Reed and you're watching this, or if you're on the fence and you're watching this, do you actually believe that Jen McCabe is able to convince Karen Reed that she maybe did it? I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to say to you. Alan Jack, so he responds anonymous responds, that line alone is worth a Pulitzer, just true perfection. No notes. Maybe Alan Jackson can incorporate this argument into his opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence will show that Ms. Reed is too well off and classy to have committed this crime. He continues. This is Turtle Boy. Jennifer McCabe called her sister Nicole at 6:07 a.m., then deleted those call logs. That's been debunked. Someone answered the phone. That's been debunked. This proved that Jen had made them aware that there was a dead body outside their house. They didn't know? Oh my God. How did he write? He must have been on drugs when he wrote this. I can't think that somebody with a normal brain would write this and not have any questions. Yet, he says, Brian Robert, so see, he's rushing this out, so he got the name wrong. A veteran Boston police officer and trained first responder didn't even come outside, despite the fact that a crime scene was unfolding on his property. So Anonymous says, in addition to getting Brian Albert's name wrong, this claim has been totally debunked. These calls were not answered, nor were they deleted. And as was made clear at trial, the Alberts didn't come outside because they were sound asleep. No one in the whole neighborhood came outside because it was 6 a.m. and the winds were howling. And I will also add that in addition to that, Karen called her parents 3 times and they didn't respond either. So on a night like that, people sleep. So Turtle Boy continues. After notifying the Alberts about the dead Boston cop on their property, Jennifer McCabe Googled, how long does it take to digest food? The presence of food particles in a dead person's stomach helps pathologists determine time of death. So Turtle Boy, I helped you out there. It's not supposed to be help is supposed to be helps. So I read it grammatically correct. So the noun in this is presence. The presence helps pathologists. So I know you were a history teacher. Obviously, you didn't teach English. And so you thought particles was the noun, was the subject, rather, of this sentence. It was not. That's a prepositional phrase. But this was also debunked at trial. Jen did not Google this. It was the auto-completed suggestion. So you start typing something in, and Google comes up with a suggestion to try to save time so you can click on it. So like smart typing. The notion that Jen would have been diabolically Googling CSI-level pathology questions at this point is ludicrous on its face. Yeah. I mean, we've heard the call. The idea that, they're all in this, this horrible event. And she's going to be Googling how long it takes food to digest. Oh, why did anybody take this guy seriously? All right. At this point, Turtle Boy says, Jennifer McCabe was panicking because she knew how suspicious the how long to die Nicole Google search would be. So she decided to search for that same thing again after discovering O'Keefe's body, hoping that it would make it look less suspicious, as this is something a person might search after finding a body outside. And doing so, she hoped that it would make the first search disappear, and it might have. How would that make it disappear? Turtle Boy's never explained that. That bothered me. I remember reading that day one. I was like, how does that make that disappear? That doesn't make it disappear. And, but also if she's thinking about making that disappear, and if she's suddenly thinking about the police going through her phone, why is she calling inside the house? I mean, all right. So 1 second earlier, she's playing amateur pathologist, but now she's panicking about a Google search she made 4 hours earlier, and she decides to Google it again to somehow make the first search disappear. The fact that this is Anonymous's fine writing. The fact that any sentient human has ever believed this explanation makes sense is a real indictment of the human race. That's why I highlighted this here, because this is a lot of the stuff that people that have reached out to me from all over the country, they look at this stuff like this, and like Minnesota Mom that wrote me the letter, and their whole worldview is kind of shaken because they're seeing that their neighbors could be someone that works at the hospital with them, could be a school teacher, They believe this shit, and it makes you realize you're surrounded by people that are almost disconnected from reality. So again, to repeat, he says the fact that any sentient human has ever believed that this explanation makes sense is a real indictment of the human race. It's disturbing because I've heard about doctors that believe in this and stuff like that, and you're like, you have people's lives in your hands, and you believe something this foolish? It's crazy. He goes on, the notion that Jen would try to duplicate her search from the prior night, complete with the misspelling that she somehow managed to remember in order to make the first search disappear, is just next level lunacy. Makes zero sense. That's not how anything works, and it's not how anyone thinks. In continues, luckily for McCabe, Brian Albert's brother is a Canton cop. His other brother is a selectman. His neighbor is the deputy chief, and the trooper in charge of the investigation was a close family friend who helped cover up the murder. It was going to be covered up regardless. Now, Chris Albert was not a selectman at the time. Proctor was not and has never been a close family friend of Brian Albert, although he does know Kevin, obviously, and does know Chris. Third, no one would have any way of knowing at this point that Proctor would be the one assigned to this case. They wouldn't. That schedule had been drawn up a month earlier. And had this call come in 15 minutes later, Proctor would not have been assigned to it. So the word luckily is doing an awful lot of work in that sentence. Turtle Boy goes on, obviously Jennifer McCabe did not kill John O'Keefe since she's not physically capable of that. Brian Albert, Colin Albert, and the dog were more than capable of that. And Colin Albert had the motive. What motive? What motive did Colin Albert have? Sorry, just looking at messages. I get messages during the show, and sometimes in case they're responding to something I'm saying or providing, for instance, like the link that I was looking for. Oh, okay. So it looks like all right. So after I finish this, thank you guys. A couple people have sent me the links that maybe show where Hank Brennan says, we'll find out exactly what he said about what time John got out of the car. So we will go to that momentarily. I promise you. So sit tight. This article, we're almost at the end. So, back to Turtle Boy's comment. McCabe was just the quarterback of the cover up and seemed to want to protect Brian Albert more than his own wife. Take from that what you will. So he's trying, I don't know what he means. So obviously Jennifer McCabe did not kill John. Brian, Colin, and the dog were more than capable of that, and Colin had the motive. What motive? Does he give a motive here? I don't think he does. McCabe was just the quarterback of the cover-up, the evil genius, meaning Jen McCabe, and seemed to want to protect Brian Albert more. And see, now I'm not sure. Turtle Boy says, and seemed to want to protect Brian Albert more than his own wife. So was he talking about Matt McCabe here? I don't know. You're not going to get a Pulitzer for this kind of writing, Turtle Boy. You really need to get an editor to proofread this because this is just bad writing. As noted above, despite years of digging, the defense team has utterly failed to uncover any motive for Colin or anyone else listed above. Second, the totally gratuitous and unsupported assertion here that Jen and Brian were somehow involved with each other is just gross. Back to Turtle Boy, after being accused in September by Reed's attorneys, Brian Albert immediately decided to sell his childhood home, which he'd been in the family for generations. It sold quickly, and as a result, was never searched by police, despite the fact that a Boston cop was probably murdered inside it. And Anonymous says this has been debunked. The Alberts first reached out to the realtors about selling their home in late 2021. I would not go so far as to say that was established, because that was just, I believe it was Brian testified to that. But you would have to actually get the real estate agent to confirm that. And I don't think we ever had that. And nor would we. I mean, they're not going to bring a real estate agent into the trial just for that. So Turtle Boy says, so how then did she break her tail right? Surveillance video from Reed's home. Well, not Reed. He says Reed. Again, there's so many mistakes in this, Turtle Boy. Jesus. It's not Reed's home. It's John's home. Can you write, dude? What is going on with you? Surveillance video, it should say from John's home, shows her backing into O'Keefe's car slightly on the way to search for him. This was always preposterous, says Anonymous, and the Commonwealth will prove at the second trial via expert testing that this event could not have damaged Karen's taillight. And that's my understanding, is that they will show that. How do they, and actually even the ARCA guys, Dr. Rensler testified that would not have caused that damage. The speed was too low. Turtle Boy goes on, how did they find the pieces of the taillight later after the Canton police did not find any in their first report? Now, this is the thing that Turtle Boy is the main reason, and I talked to him on the phone back in the day, this was the main reason he believed in the conspiracy. And I explained him the answer on the phone. And I was still on the fence at the time, but I explained him the answer, but he doesn't want the answer because it ruins the grift. All right. He says, conveniently, they appeared hours after Proctor took Reed's vehicle, and the state police, perhaps on a hunch, decided to search it again. What? He doesn't even understand how investigations work, and that's okay. I didn't understand at the time either. But that's how you start out, by recognizing your own ignorance and look into it. And keep asking questions until things make sense. So in Massachusetts, any unattended death, there'll be an investigation, and it's going to be run by the state police, with the exception of the towns of Worcester, Springfield, and Boston, because they have their own homicide departments. They're large enough cities. But everywhere else, any unattended death, there'll be an investigation, and it'll be headed by the state police. Now, those investigators don't work out of a barracks. They work out of the district attorney's office from whatever county that they're in. And they work in conjunction with the local police. So it's basically the state police leading the local guys to get the investigation done. So the taillight, so the Canton police never did a search of the crime scene. What they did was try to preserve perishable evidence because of the falling snow. Now, had there been no snowstorm, the Canton police would have just left that scene untouched. They would have just waited for the state police to get there and run their investigation. It's their crime scene. However, they understood it was going to be hours before the state police were going to get there. So they looked and they saw evidence, that primarily the blood evidence, that was perishable because snow was falling on it. So they were highly motivated cops, and they ran a pretty intelligent investigation to try to preserve that blood evidence. They did the best they could. They were highly motivated. They weren't in look the other way mode. And they were never going to find the taillight pieces, however, because they were buried under snow. They just searched around John's body where you could see the grass, because John's body had prevented the snow from accumulating there. The main John's sneaker and the main taillight piece was found within the snowbank. And the state police, Lieutenant O'Hara, described digging 3 feet down into that snowbank, and they found that taillight piece, that first one, the corner piece, in the gutter, so at street level. There was no way that the Canton police were ever going to find that. And if Turtle Boy was interested in the truth, he would have figured that out eventually. He's not interested in the truth. All right, so Turtle Boy also says that even more remarkably, Canton Chief Berkowitz also decides to go to the scene of the crime on a hunch and noticed more pieces of taillight from his moving vehicle. All right. Anonymous says this was also debunked at trial, and the timeline just doesn't allow for it. Also, the idea that the conspirators, for some reason, saved some pieces of taillight to give to Chief Berkowitz to plant and find weeks later is right up there among the dumbest things that FKR folks still believe. It's a very good point, right? So if you're going to plant the evidence there, why do you hold on to some of it? Why don't you just plant it all there that night? Right? I mean, if Trooper Proctor is, and the ghost that we had working for him inside the Sallyport is smashing the taillight and bagging all those pieces and getting the ghost to deliver it to the crime scene, don't they deliver all of it? All right. Turtle Boy says Trooper Proctor, Brian Albert, Colin Albert, and Jen McCabe should all spend significant amount of time in jail, and 2 of them should be charged with murder. Well, the one that's going to spend significant time in jail is Turtle Boy. All right. Notice the name that's missing from this is Brian Higgins. It's pretty hilarious that the story Aiden is so proud of fails to excuse me, fails to point the finger at the person Karen's entire defense now centers around. He couldn't even name the right fake culprit. Turtle Boy continues, every other person in that house should be charged with obstruction of justice as they witnessed a crime and never reported it. Do you understand how difficult and remarkable it is for at least 11 people to keep their mouths shut for over a year after witnessing the murder of a cop? That's the kind of fear that the Albert family puts into these people. There's no crimes connected to the Albert family. There's not, like, they make it seem like it's the Bulger family. It's absurd. And others have done it too, Sean. I mean, it's just crazy. And look, if John was beat up and killed in the house, maybe they could have scared Sarah Levinson and Julie Nagel, who were 23-year-old women with their lives in front of them. Sarah's a nurse. Maybe they could have terrified them into being quiet initially. But they would have lived in a tormented life knowing that they were part of a murder conspiracy. That's not part of their lives. These aren't criminals. And as soon as they realized that the FBI was investigating it, they would have gone running to make a deal. They would have. It's just, and we know that they didn't, and we now know the federal investigation is over. The fact that the feds investigated this so hard and had to end the investigation without finding any exculpatory evidence at all for Karen, because they had to give her any exculpatory evidence. Anything, for instance, let's say they found evidence to indicate a conspiracy, but not enough to get indictments. They would have to give that evidence over to Karen. They would have given it over last March when they gave it over. So they didn't find anything. So the very fact that the feds dug into this and found nothing is an incredible indictment of Karen. That's the irony of this. For so long, the existence of the federal investigation was this boogeyman. Hey, the feds are coming, right? But now that we know they ain't coming, that is a powerful indictment of Karen. The fact that the feds couldn't find any. Karen needs a conspiracy in order to be innocent, and the feds couldn't find it. They got all the messages. They presumably got geofence and other kinds of stuff, and they couldn't find it. And so this is the end. Let's finish his conclusion. There are a lot of other groaners in the piece too. Talking about Aiden's first article. Aiden shows a picture of Proctor with 2 children who he claims are the McCabe girls, but they're not. He claims that the defense only received the McCabe phone data because they subpoenaed it. No, Jen volunteered her phone. And in one of my favorite throwaway lines, he claims that O'Keefe could not have been injured in a car collision because the snow would have comforted his fall. That is a weird one. As he notes elsewhere in the article, though, there was hardly any snow on the ground at 12:30. So he can't even maintain factual consistency within his own article. It does, reading this article now like this, it really does seem like Turtle Boy was on something when he wrote it. Or maybe he's just not that smart. I don't know. All right, so let me take this out for the moment and go to let's see if we got the video. All right, I can put it back in. Oh. All right, here we are. I don't know why the fan has stopped. All right.
And is in the possession of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, and the information is relevant material to Karen Reed's case. The reason why it's important and relevant is that separately, I possess information that establishes not only a relationship between Karen Reed and Mr. Carney, but a relationship in where information, some of it private, some of it suggestive grand jury minutes, was passed purposefully from to Mr. Carney. Originally, a third party was used, an intermediary, where allegedly Ms. Reed would send the information to the third party, would then be sent to
Counsel, let me stop you there. Has the name of the intermediary appeared in the public record?
I don't know that. I know that the attorneys are very well aware of that person's name. It may be, but I don't know that, and that's why I've refrained.
Let me ask you this, counsel. Does the name of the intermediary appear in Trooper Tully's affidavit, either in the substantially itself or in the addendum A?
I will need to re-review, but it very well may.
Well, that's a critical issue here with regard to the purported relevance of the data sought. Let me ask you this, Attorney Brennan. Have the extraction reports that have been requested been generated?
I understand they are available to Special Prosecutor Cosgrove and that they have the reports that have been generated.
Has the underlying data from the two phones in question been assembled?
I understand that it has. I cannot personally confirm because I have not asked to review it personally.
Do you know the volume of the underlying data?
I have no idea because I've purposely not asked to see it or ask questions about it.
Okay. Please elaborate on relevance as it relates to consciousness of guilt.
Yes. As Your Honor is aware, consciousness of guilt is a different standard than trying to prove a case of intimidation of a witness beyond a reasonable doubt. What we expect evidence will show, separately and in Mr. Carney's phone, is that there was a relationship between Karen Reed and Mr. Carney, in which Ms. Reed would provide information indirectly and directly to Mr. Carney. That information would then be reviewed by Mr. Carney, posted on social media, and consequently was used, we believe, allegedly, to intimidate and harass witnesses. In the search warrant itself, there is extraordinary detail on how Mr. Carney targeted witnesses in Ms. Reed's case, with the express purpose, according to Mr. Carney, that this trial of Ms. Reed never go forward. We have a many-page affidavit that we have provided to the court. I can offer some of the most important parts if Your Honor would like.
Counsel, I don't think that's necessary. I've reviewed the affidavit in support of the search warrant thoroughly, and here's where I struggle.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was a 6-minute. So somebody sent me this, and I don't. Key section starts at 3:25. All right, so I missed that part of it. Thank you, guys. I got to go to 3:25. Let me see if I got this right. 3:25:51. All right. So sorry, guys. I wasted your time on that. I didn't realize the person had told me to go to. I thought they sent me a clip, but they actually sent me the whole thing. But they did tell me the time. So thank you very much. This is from Missing Advocates. That's a new name to me, but thank you very much. I appreciate the help. So let's play it. Let's see if we got it here.
Standards that Attorney Lisi is insisting on are excused, but if they don't like the opinion, somehow should be excluded. They're really polar opposites when you think about the perspective and the opinions they give. They both have a different opinion about the taillight causing the injury to Mr. O'Keefe's arm. One the defense likes, one they don't. It is the same science, same study, same analysis. And so if it's acceptable for ARCA, it must be acceptable for Dr. Welcher. Dr. Welcher actually downloaded the text stream data. He didn't ignore it. He didn't know that it didn't exist. He didn't fail to consider it. He actually downloaded it himself. He is experienced. He looked the material, studied the material. The text stream data is critical in this case because it shows time and place with the new information that we have. So we know from the ways information exactly.
So that's really good. It was good to rehear that. So the text stream data shows time and place with the new information that we have. So remember, in the text stream data before, there was no time, there was no GPS, and there were no timestamps. So he's confirming here that they know time and place from the new information, from the new data. So it's not from, for example, they may have interesting data from John's phone that they looked at about the temperature inside it that was stored inside that database. That could have given them an indication what time John went outside. And that may be part of it too. But we know here that they have in the new data, they have timestamps and GPS. Now we'll see exactly for what, but that's going to be powerful.
Exactly where that car went from the waterfall to the flagpole. We know where it didn't stop along the way. We know, based on the phone data, Mr. O'Keefe's phone data, when he was in the car until we have.
All right. So we know based on the phone data when he was in the car until. Now, that was not something that was revealed in the first trial. So, so that would suggest, I know some people have talked about looking at the temperature. Your phone records temperature because if it gets too hot, it becomes a risk for fire or even have damage. Like if you're sitting reading in the sun and it'll shut down. So it does have a temperature sensor in it. And so apparently this sensor may be enough to give us an indication when he left the car. And we don't know if that, or it could be some other indication.
Of all that evidence, and as a bioengineer, he can consider all of that technical data, which will be introduced through other witnesses at trial before he testifies. And it's important. The location and timing of that car is important. This is all science and data. It's not witness testimony. It's science and data. And it puts that car at that flagpole at the time Mr. O'Keefe is there with his cell phone, locked into the Bluetooth in that Lexus until he gets out of the car after 12:30. And with
all right, so that's an indicator there too. So the Bluetooth, your phone can. So when you connect the phone to the Bluetooth in your car, that allows you to get calls over the car on your phone. Now, was John's phone connected in that way to Karen's Lexus? Maybe, maybe not, because these phone, when it comes to Bluetooth, these things are trying to make connections anyways, just to see if you do have the password, or if you're, it's, you know, the devices are reaching out to each other to see if there's if they know if that phone belongs on that, if it recognizes it.
within 2 minutes, we allege this collision occurs. And there's Apple Health data.
All right, let me go back, replay that a little bit again.
There are no medical diagnoses by Dr. Welcher. These are
Oh, I went back
his
too far.
opinions based on a study of the evidence. Standards that Attorney Lisi is insisting on are excused, but if they don't like the opinion, somehow should be excluded. They're really polar opposites when you think about the perspective and the opinions they give. They both have a different opinion about the taillight causing the injury to Mr. O'Keefe's arm. One the defense likes, one they don't. It is the same science, same study, same analysis. And so if it's acceptable for ARCA, it must be acceptable for Dr. Welcher. Dr. Welcher actually downloaded the text stream data. He didn't ignore it. He didn't know that it didn't exist. He didn't fail to consider it. He actually downloaded it himself. He is experienced.
So these are important ways to where he say he didn't ignore it, because the ARCA guys did ignore it. Now, they weren't given it by the feds. The feds had it. For some reason, they didn't give it to the ARCA guys, which is, again, very suspicious. Now, the ARCA guys on their website, published just a year before John's death, was an article showing that they are experts in Toyota Lexus text stream data. Yet they didn't reach out to the U.S. attorney and say, hey, do you have any text stream data? Again, there's a difference between looking for the truth and looking for a way to help the narrative that you've already decided that you're on.
He looked the material, studied the material. The text stream data is critical in this case because it shows time and place with the new information that we have. So we know from the Waze information exactly where that car went from the waterfall to the flagpole. We know where it didn't stop along the way. We know, based on the phone data Mr. O'Keefe's phone data when he was in the car until we have all that evidence. And as a bioengineer, he can consider all of that technical data, which will be introduced through other witnesses at trial before he testifies. And it's important. The location and timing of that car is important. This is all science and data. It's not witness testimony. It's science and data. And it puts that car at that flagpole at the time Mr. O'Keefe is there with his cell phone, locked into the Bluetooth in that Lexus until he gets out of the car after 12:30. And within 2 minutes, we allege this collision occurs. And there's Apple Health data, there's location data, there's cell phone battery temperature. It all coincides. He should be able to consider these things in his study. This is what he does. The demonstration at Meadowbrook, John O'Keefe's house, is depicted by measurements which has been provided, science and data, by the ring videos, which will be independently admissible. And we see the gentle nudging of that Lexus into Mr. O'Keefe's car. And there has been allegations, claims, suggestions that that's where the taillight may have broken despite the other contrary evidence. You can see in the presentation, he actually shows not only the nudging in the car leaving through the ring video, but analyzes it, and you can see exactly where those two cars came into contact, and it wasn't the taillight.
All right. So I think thank you very much for sending me that link. So he didn't say that we know what time John got out or unhooked his seatbelt or anything like that. So I don't think I think that turned out to be a false report. But we got a lot of other stuff, and we may get that may turn out to be something we get during the trial, but he didn't say that here. So, but we're going to know from a variety of data sources what time he got out of the car. And within 2 minutes of that is when he gets struck. So, they're nailing this down. And I don't really, if you're ARCA, dude, do you want to destroy your whole reputation on this? If you're Dr. Russell or Garrett Wing, do you want to destroy your whole reputation just to be a hero to this mindless mob? Because it destroys your reputation. Like, those ARCA guys are PhDs, they're experts, and what that company does is primarily testifying, and their analysis was wrong. They got it wrong. And that's proved by the additional data here. Do they really want to take that chance? So I think not. All right, let me before I go to Mr. Lally and his opening statements, because we got opening statements tomorrow, right? Get ready, guys. We got opening statements tomorrow. I want to just give a couple of thoughts on opening statements myself. Whipped these together this morning, and we'll see if this applies to what Lally did. But the first thought is this. This is a long trial. Even if this trial, they're thinking that it might go 7 or 8 weeks now. The last one went 10 weeks. And I wouldn't be surprised if this one goes 10 weeks. So the things that are said in opening statements to that jury, by the time they get to deliberations, 99% of that information is completely forgotten. Now, what do you remember about David Yanetti's opening statement last year? Well, what you remember is he came out of the gate and said, my client was framed. You probably don't remember anything else, but that's what we remember. And that's the main thing he wanted that jury to take away. And he had their attention at that point. What do you remember about Lally's opening statement? Can you think of anything? I mean, so what was the point of it? If that jury got to the end, if that jury gets to deliberations and they don't remember anything, kind of was no point, right? Or did that opening statement at least get them, as they were watching the witnesses during the trial, did that opening statement at least set them on a path so they knew what was important and what to look for? I don't think so. But all right. So if you know that basically you're going to give your half-hour statement, but that a jury is only going to remember one or two, maybe three things at the most, only if you're really delivering well and they're really impactful, then you got to focus on those things and you got to really prune out as much of the rest as possible. I would have no problem with Hank Brennan going up there and giving a 5-minute opening statement. I'm sure he's not going to do that, but so within that 5 minutes, that jury's going to remember much more of it. It's much more focused and much more impactful. Now, you also the prosecution is going to go first. Now they know when the defense goes, they're going to go with a some variation of what they did last year. They may not come out and say, "My client Karen Reed was framed." That was a mistake last year because as powerful as it was oratory wise, it created an expectation that they didn't meet at all. They didn't really even ever show a single example of any evidence being manufactured or planted. They didn't show a single example of Karen being framed of anything. So you don't want to lose all your credibility by creating a false expectation. So what you want to do is maybe hint it down. So I think the defense will say that, like I tried to go with my mock opening defense statement the other day, that something is fishy here. That's a similar way of saying my client was framed, but it's more vague. So by saying something is fishy, you don't have to create that false explanation. But they're definitely going to go, the defense, with some version of this investigation was fishy, it was botched, it was biased, and corrupt. They're definitely going to do that in some version of that. So you have to anticipate that in your opening statement. Now, the way I anticipate that is by saying the evidence that convicts Karen, that you're going to hear, that's going to convict Karen Reed, is nuts and bolts evidence that could not have been manufactured. So for me, I would want the jury to take away, one, the fact that the evidence is nuts and bolts and it's overwhelming. It proves that the Lexus struck John beyond any doubt. Two, that evidence, that nuts and bolts evidence, could not have been manufactured. There's no way that it could have been. Even if all the cops wanted to frame Karen Reed, even if all the cops were corrupt, these were the dirtiest cops ever, they could not have manufactured that evidence. And you'll see why. So, for instance, with the taillight pieces, Karen's car was under ring surveillance at One Metals, John's house, and then it was under camera surveillance at her parents' house. And all other times, she was in the car. So all day, there was no opportunity to tamper with that vehicle. And by the time it got to the Sally Port, it was too late. It was just too late. It's not reasonable to even speculate that it wasn't too late. It was too late. I'm sorry, Sue O'Connell. No, there was no window to plant evidence. That taillight piece found at 5:45 was found buried 3 feet down in the snow. So unless all those guys on the CERT team, the 7-man CERT team, were in on it, they have to be in on it. So now you're adding more groups of people in on this who despite having no motive, are framing someone for murder. Then there's no way that the taillight pieces could have been planted. And really, that could be the end of the case right here. The taillight pieces were reassembled and matched to what's missing on Karen's car. And there's no way that they could have been planted. Now, fortunately, there's a whole bunch of other more powerful evidence with the data, as we just heard about. But you could end the case right there, and you should get a conviction. That's enough. There was no opportunity to plant evidence. It's not about police being trustworthy or not. It's about there was just no opportunity for them to do that. So, one, the evidence is nuts and bolts and is overwhelming. Two, it could not have been manufactured. And three, I would maybe try to remind them the defense is going to try to take your eye off the ball. They're good at what they do. And what we want you to do is imagine yourself making two piles of evidence. On the right, you have for the defendant, and on the left, for the state. Now, most of the stuff on the right is going to consist of odd things. butt dials or whatever. Those could be meaningful. Don't ignore them. Stack them up, leave them there so you can look at them later. But then on the left, you're going to stack up all that nuts and bolts evidence. And that, when you look at that nuts and bolts evidence, if that is convincing to you, if that is overwhelmingly convincing to you, then you know that those odd things are just things that have other explanations that have nothing to do with the conspiracy. That's just simple. It's just simple logic. For example, if you had video or a witness to Karen's Lexus striking John, then you wouldn't care about butt dials anymore, would you? You wouldn't be wondering whether or not those injuries on John's arm were made by a dog, because you'd have that compelling evidence. Well, what I'm saying is we have that compelling evidence. It doesn't happen to be video, but it's just as compelling. And to me, those are kind of the three things that I would kind of focus on. I would remind the jury that the defense's job, these are high, maybe if you can point out that these are good lawyers, high-priced lawyers, you probably can't say that, but you could, Brennan's clever. He knows what the limitations of the law are, how far he can go, and use words like conjure. The defense is going to try to distract the jury with tricks that they will conjure. That's what they've done to the public, and that's what they're going to do to the jury. And remember, that's their job. They're a high-profile defense team. Look at them all stacked up at the table. That's what they were brought in to do. The state's job was to bring in the nuts and bolts evidence, line it up, and explain it. And that's what they're going to do. The only last piece of advice that I have going into this is for Hank, is that down the road, when you question Dr. Russell, be gentle. She's an elderly woman. She's a doctor. She is deserving of respect because of those things. And if the jury sees that you're trying to trip her up with semantics, because it'll look like you're trying to, they'll be reminded of their mother or their grandmother, and know that, it's easy. When somebody gets older like that, it's easier to kind of trip them up with wordsmithing. Their brains are fine, but they're not quite as quick. And so don't do that. Don't do that. Be very, very careful. And don't underestimate Dr. Russell. She is a very intelligent woman, and she can see the traps coming to some degree. So don't underestimate her. She's a doctor. And by this point, she's now had 2 voir dires and testified at trial. So she's been very well prepared by Alessi, who that's what his field of expertise is preparing expert witnesses. So Dr. Russell is going to come on the stand very prepped, very practiced, very ready. So it's going to be a tricky thing. You want to kind of discredit her, but you've got to do it not in a bulldog way. You've got to be gentle. All right, so let's go to Lowry's opening and see if we get some thoughts from that.
Discuss this case with anyone. This includes family and friends, and even your fellow jurors. Nor should you allow anyone to communicate with you about any aspect of this case. You must not conduct any independent research about this case, the matters in this case, the individuals involved in this case. In other words, you must not consult the internet, including social media.
And we know for a fact that the dismissed juror was going into bars and in the American Legion and in the Boston Ale House and saying that she was a turtle rider.
And do anything else to find out any information from any source outside the confines of this courtroom. As best as you recognize them, please have no contact with any of the participants in this trial or anyone associated with either side, including the lawyers. Please do not visit any locations that may be mentioned during the trial. We will go on a view and I will discuss that with you before we go. Remember, you were instructed that you must not, and you assured us that you would not, read, watch, or listen to any account of any aspect of this case in any news media or from any other source. It is critical that you follow that instruction, as hard as it's going to be. Finally, please continue to keep an open mouth. Now, I know that you will try this case according to the oath that you have taken as jurors. When you took that oath, you promised that you would well and truly try the issues between the Commonwealth and the defendant according to the evidence and the law. If you follow that oath, approach this case with an open mind, and make your decisions fairly and without prejudice, bias, or sympathy for anyone, then you will arrive at a true and just verdict. And that's what we ask of you. So with that, it's time for opening statements. And whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And when I watched the beginning of this, you see Peg O'Keefe take a deep breath there. I mean, this is just so hard for the family. And you'll see as Adam Lally starts describing John, the emotional reaction that she has. So just keep in mind how strong they have to be to go through this and how difficult this is for them.
And I ask only that you keep your voice up, please.
Do my best. Good morning. So as Her Honor was telling you, this is one of the two opportunities that I will get to address. The first of which right now, essentially what I'm going to attempt to do, and I know you've heard over the course of the impairment process, a number of different witnesses that were listed out as far as potential witnesses in this case. So what my intent here is to provide as much of a roadmap as I can through those waters and help me to navigate sort of who these people are.
Okay. Don't do what he just did, Hank. This is what Alessi does too, and it drove the judge crazy. Don't tell the jurors what you're going to do. Just do it. Economy of words. You've already lost them, and you're only 15 seconds into it, and they're already checking their watch and wondering what's for lunch. Compare that to David Yannetti, who stands up there, and his first words are, Karen Reed was framed. He's got their attention. Adam Lally has lost their attention within the first 15 seconds. And David Yannetti, we know the mistake of maybe doing it that way, but he got their attention. You're telling a story, you're talking to people, you're giving a lecture, anything, you've got to get their attention. Otherwise, they're not listening to anything you're saying.
And what relation they have to this case. We start with John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe grew up in Braintree. He was 46 years old when he passed. He was.
Now, I think in my mock statements, this is something that I didn't do, and perhaps I should, what Lally does here. So he just gives a background on the case. And I think you probably, if I was to go back and redo my mock, I would add that in. In a way you don't want to do it because it's reducing your, you're reducing your narrative flow. But if you assume these jurors come in without knowing the story, you've got to at least give them the basics. But don't do any more. Don't minimize it. Give them just what they need to know to understand. John O'Keefe was a Boston cop. He was a good guy. He's raising his nephew and niece. He's been dating Karen the last couple of years. And that night they meet for drinks. They go to the waterfall. She drops him off. And the rest is what has to be explored during the trial. You should be able to say this in a very succinct way.
The son of John O'Keefe Jr. and Margaret or Peggy O'Keefe. He was a brother to Paul O'Keefe and to his sister, Kristen Furbush.
And so what he's trying to do here, and has some value, is trying to humanize the victim. But be careful. See, this in screenplay writing. There's one of the challenges is to not overwhelm the reader. Again, because a film starts with a screenplay, and somebody has to read it first and decide this is interesting. And so you have to capture the reader. And you don't want to give them too many names because the human brain can only process so many names. I can't process many at all. So if you do this, it's all getting lost, and you're losing the narrative flow when you do it.
Kristen was married, so John's brother-in-law was a man named Stephen, and they had two children who were very young in 2013. Now,
See, like, so he mentions Kristen's husband, Stephen. What's the point? He died 8 years ago. There's no need to use his name. Just explain that John's beloved sister died, and then months later, her husband suddenly died, and John had to step up. That's enough. You don't need the biography.
2013, Kristen, unfortunately, tragically, passed away, succumbing to cancer in November of 2013. Within
We don't need to know that she died in November. We don't even need to know what she died of. If you put too much information, the important stuff won't be in focus.
months of that, Mr. O'Keefe's brother-in-law and Kristen's husband, Stephen, passed away as well. Now, initially, when John O'Keefe's sister passed away, sort of the initial plan for that situation was that John O'Keefe was going to move in with Stephen Forbush and kids and assist as far as raising them. And then when Stephen passed away a few months after his wife, before those plans could be finalized, John O'Keefe then moved in with his niece and nephew and assumed the parental role and assumed legal guardianship with respect to both of those children. Now, he was assisted in this by a great number of people within the town of Canton where the Forbushes lived and where John moved into the home with the two children there. There were other parents within the neighborhood, other parents within the children's age group. You'll hear from a number of them over the course of this trial, but they included Mrs. Carrie Roberts and Mrs. Jennifer McKay. They helped Mr. O'Keefe out during those initial stages and during the time that he assumed this role. He also got help.
All right. So what he's doing here is, see, what you're supposed to do in the opening statement is to provide a roadmap, but he's taking it too literally. And that's a huge missed opportunity. So you don't want to say, all right, we've got 90 witnesses here, and I'm going to give you all of their names and what they're going to testify. That's going to get lost. You're wasting an opportunity here because the jury's not going to remember a fucking word of that. And so what's the point of saying it? So you took it literally, the idea that the opening statement is supposed to be a roadmap, but the roadmap is supposed to be the key points along the way, not every little point along the way. It's got to be the key points along the way to get you to the destination. And it has to have some narrative elements to it that get the jury's attention. So, for instance, telling the jury that my client was framed, not only is it memorable, it gets the jury's attention. You sit right up in your seat like, holy shit. This woman's on trial for murder, and they're saying she was framed. You're paying attention. You've got to do something that makes the jury sit up in their seats and pay attention.
John O'Keefe was a proud member of the Boston Police Department, had been for many years. He had been a patrolman prior to moving in with children and assuming this role. Boston Police Department helped him greatly as far as positioning him to more of a desk role, working in the sex offender unit with more regular hours to sort of assimilate himself to this new life and this new role with his children. Initially, John O'Keefe lived in the house with the kids. However, in 2018, they moved into a new home, sort of a new home that they could have as their own. That home is located also within the town of Canton, sort of on the Stoughton side of Canton at One Meadows Ave. John O'Keefe raised these children, assuming guardianship for them for about 8 years. His niece, who was the elder of the two, was about 14 at the time that John O'Keefe died. And his nephew was about 11 years old at the time that John O'Keefe died. January 28th, 2022 was a relatively typical day. It was a Friday going into a Saturday of January 29th. Sort of typical in the sense of most sort of suburban parents. There were a lot of activities, weekend sports, practices, games, things of that nature that the O'Keefe and Forbush family had to look forward to. One little difference when it came to that particular day of January 28th and the 29th is the weather. So there had been predicted and there was going to be a snowstorm, and significant. a blizzard essentially was coming in overnight that Friday into Saturday, lasting through most of the day on Saturday the 29th. And as a result of that, most of those sort of typical, weekend routine activities that would keep most people, including those within the town's camp, busy, have been canceled ahead of time. Everybody knew what was coming. Everybody knew essentially you weren't going to leave your house all that much the following day. Now, also on January 28th, Mr. O'Keefe had received some news in respect to his niece. So his niece and her best friend were in 8th grade at the time, going into high school in the fall of 2022. They had both applied to a private school called Michigan, and they both found out on the 28th that they had been accepted. So the friend, as well as her father, a gentleman by the name of Michael Camerano, who's both he and his wife, Catherine.
So it's more name dropping, and you're going to give this jury 100 names to memorize. They're not going to remember any of them. So what's the point? What's the point of saying it if they're not going to remember it? I don't really understand the purpose of any of this.
Camerano were friendly with John O'Keefe. They had children around the same ages as both John's niece and his nephew. And they had come over to their house on Meadows Ave that evening to celebrate the girls getting into bed. The nephew of John, the 11-year-old, was sleeping over a friend's house that night. He left that home sometime around 7 p.m. or so.
Boy, I can't take any more of it. Actually, it's almost like when you have a kid that gets an assignment to write a paper, and the paper is what you did on your day, what you did on your day off from school, and he describes every one thing. So at 6:15, I got up and I had Cheerios, and my dad made me finish the milk when it was done, and then after that, I took a bath. There's no narrative flow. There's no narrative understanding of story. That's like how a kid would do it. I can't listen anymore. So let's go to Unetti's opening. We'll listen to a little bit of that. We'll listen to the close, I guess, of
minor injuries to it in the same right hand that's attached to his right arm that has the abrasions and lacerations that are observed by the paramedics, that are observed by the doctors at Good Samaritan, and are observed by the medical examiner as well. You'll hear testimony from another analyst, Christina Hanley, about the forensic consistency between a drinking glass that was in the defendant's bumper and the drinking glass pieces that were found on scene at 34th Fair. You'll hear her testimony in regard to pieces of red and clear plastic that were microscopic in size that were found within Mr. O'Keefe's clothing. Consistent, in her opinion, I anticipate she'll testify, with the same pieces of plastic contained within the defendant's taillight. You'll hear from an Ashley Valley, who works for the lab as well, and how she fit the various pieces of broken taillight from the scene together and over that taillight housing, finding them to be consistent with each other as well. You'll hear testimony from Andre Porto.
yes, slow roast. We will be streaming every day of the trial.
Samples that were DNA samples that were taken from the taillight, from the clothes of Mr. O'Keefe, and the broken drinking glass that were consistent with Mr. O'Keefe. Those items were also sent, the taillight pieces, taillight DNA was also sent to an independent lab, Bodie Technologies, located in Lorton, Virginia. And you'll hear from an analyst there, Mr. Nicholas Bradford, indicating that the DNA on the defendant's taillight, in his opinion, is consistent with that of Mr. O'Keefe, and inconsistent with Trooper Proctor and Sergeant Buchanan, who were the two preliminary investigators and primary investigators. I
mean, look at the faces of the O'Keefes. I felt, listen, I don't want to, I'm not trying to beat up on Lally because I think he's a good guy. He's handling hundreds of these cases a year, just trying to get through them. I'm sure he's a talented guy, and with a little bit of practice, maybe he'll learn from being under Hank Brennan. But look at the faces of the O'Keefes. They're disappointed because, and I remember feeling the same thing listening to this. That is the one thing I remember, as I felt this sinking feeling. Oh my God, we're in trouble. That's the only thing I really remembered from the opening statement, was that sinking feeling. And that seems to be the same thing we're seeing on the faces of the O'Keefes.
You'll also hear from this test chart from that Bodie Laboratories in regard to some mitochondrial DNA that she examined in regard to that hair that Ms. Hartnett found on the bumper of the car, in her opinion that it was consistent with that of Mr. O'Keefe as well.
Hopefully the jury can hear him better than we can.
Lastly, you'll also hear from Dr. Irene Scortibello and Dr. Renee Stonebridge of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in regard to their various examinations. Dr. Stonebridge is a neuropathologist. She essentially examines brain findings. Dr. Irene Scortibello is a forensic pathologist who does the sort of autopsy and medical examination of Mr. O'Keefe's body. You'll
I don't
hear
know.
about
What did he just say there? His voice just
variety
trailed
of
off so
injuries
bad.
that she
I don't know.
observed over Mr. O'Keefe's body. In particular, you'll hear testimony in regard to lacerations to the right back of his head. You'll hear testimony in regard to an initial sort of skull fracture that occurs to the back of his head, and then sort of a radiating skull fracture that goes throughout his skull, which then leads to a subdural hemorrhage, or essentially bleeding on the brain and then swelling of the brain, which then causes a condition called ecchymosis, which then sort of leads to the swelling of both of Mr. O'Keefe's eyes that was observed by the initial response. You will hear various testimony about sort of issues in regard to his pancreas, how that's indicative of hypothermia. Now, again, as I said, this is the first of two times that I have an opportunity to address you directly. And I thank you very much for your attention today, and I thank you for the participation of your close attention as we go through all of the witnesses and all the evidence in this case. That second time that I do get to address you, what I'll be asking you, based on the evidence, and again, as the board has instructed you, you are the sole arbiters of the facts of this case. You are the ones who find what the facts, and I reiterate that, facts, and what the evidence demonstrates. What I submit to you at that time, that second time, is that the only true and just verdict based on that is that the defendant, Karen Reed, is guilty of murder in the second degree.
I agree, Debbie. He did do well on the cross of Arca.
With a car, knocking him back onto the ground.
And a rich screen.
His head on the ground, causing the bleeding in his brain, swelling, and then leaving him there for several hours in a blizzard, with temperatures in the teens, wind swirling around, snow piling up on his body until she comes with Mrs. McCabe and Mrs. Roberts just after 6 a.m. And that she is also guilty of vehicular manslaughter, operating under the influence of liquor, and that she is also guilty of leaving the scene after causing death. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lally. Mr. Nettie?
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court.
Just want to pause here to say, so you guys see my friend Pale Yellow in chat. So this is my very, very good friend from Florida, and she used to run a small film production company called Pale Yellow Productions, and I named this channel after that, in honor of her. That's why it's Yellow Cottage Tales.
Karen Reed was framed. Her car never struck John O'Keefe. She did not cause his death. And that means that somebody else did. You will learn that it was no accident that John O'Keefe was found dead on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road in Canton on January 29th.
So note, they were not allowed to use third-party culprit in the opening. So what does that mean? Well, they did say that a third party did it. So the limitation apparently just means that you couldn't blame it on someone specifically.
2022. You will learn that at that address lived a well-known and well-connected law enforcement family in Canton, the Alberts. Because the Alberts were involved, and because they had close connections to the investigators in this case, Karen Reed was framed for a murder she did not commit. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. As I previously told you, my name is David Yannetti. I'm an attorney with an office in Boston. Together with attorneys Alan Jackson and Elizabeth Little, it's truly my privilege and my honor to represent Karen Reed during this trial. From a very early juncture in this case, you will question the Commonwealth's theory of the case. You will question the quality of the Commonwealth's evidence. You will question the veracity of the Commonwealth's witnesses. And you will question their shoddy and biased investigation, a faulty investigation that led to Karen Reed sitting here today. You will learn, in short, that the police did no real investigation of this case, and you will question why. You'll question why the investigators had such tunnel vision. You'll question why they focused solely on Karen Reed, someone with no ties to the Canton Police Department, as opposed to the well-known and well-connected Albert family of Canton, family that was never treated as suspects by the investigators in this case.
Okay, I don't know. It's very well delivered. And you see the narrative flow there that he's trying to establish. Now, as I've said, the imperfection is you maybe created the fatal flaw of this was being so specific that they created a false expectation. But short of that, it contrasts so well with Adam Lally's in that you have a narrative flow here that is emphasizing the points that they want, that the police investigation was deeply flawed, that it was corrupt, that the Alberts have connections, that Karen doesn't have connections. It's hitting all the points that they want. That's how you create a narrative. And it's going to be different with the prosecution. They have to do it a little different way. But still, you still want to use those same principles of trying to build and create a narrative, because a narrative is what enables people to remember something. If I read you a list of evidence that's 100 pages long, you're not going to remember any of it. But if I give you a narrative, once upon a time, it was a dark and stormy night, and then this happened, and what about this, and this created this mystery, and we'll resolve that later. Oh, and now we resolve it. Using those narrative elements, now you insert that evidence within those narrative elements, and people remember it. And so that's why, Adam Lally might as well have just got up there and said, "We're going to prove to you Karen did this," and then just stopped, because not everything else he did was a waste of time. There was no point of it. Now, I'm not trying to beat up Lally. So my friend Deb, I agree. I think that Lally did a lot of things well. He mastered the technology of wall files and SQLite and all that stuff. So he did a brilliant job of debunking Rich Green. And they may use him again in the trial here when it comes to Rich Green. I think he did a very good job overall of debunking the conspiracy theory. I like Adam Lally. And had they not selected a special prosecutor, I would have been okay with Adam Lally, but nervous. I would have been like, as long as he grows and learns from the mistakes of this first trial. And so I'm not anti-Lally, but this stuff does frustrate me because it was a big mischance. Yeah, he did a fairly good job in cross-examining. Yeah. I thought he did a good job with the ARCA guys. So I agree with Deb. I agree with Joe. So thank you guys. All right. So we got to be back on tomorrow morning. I set it for 8:45. I'll try to get on at 8:30. I think there may be some motions business in the morning. Actually, let's look back and see in this trial if there was motions business.
Remains with the defendant until.
No, actually, so if there was motions business, it took place off camera. And so what we had was the Judge Canoni instructing the jury, which is interesting. And then you go to, then you go to the opening statements. And then the first witness was actually Paul O'Keefe. I don't know who should be the first witness tomorrow. And, there's different strategic considerations. Well, let me ask you guys. So I've been doing these. I haven't been able to pay attention to chat. Let me pay attention to chat now. And so you guys tell me, who do you think should be who would you recommend they make the first witness tomorrow? The prosecution. You guys got any ideas on that? And I'll look through for. Mrs. O'Keefe was not called though, and she's last time, and she's not a witness to anything. So I don't know why they would call Mrs. O'Keefe. But why do you guys think they would call Mrs. O'Keefe? I mean, she was witness to Karen's behavior in the house. Jeff says start with Jen McCabe. She's on the list, but I don't think she'll be called. She might be on the witness list, but I don't think there's any reason to call John's mother in. Slow Roast suggested Kerry, and I think that's a good idea because we don't know they'll do this again this way, but Kerry was really the most compelling witness emotionally in the first trial, and the defense chose to not cross-examine her. So if that happens again, if Kerry's the first witness and the defense again chooses to not cross-examine her, that kind of sends a message to the jury like, wow, they're not even cross-examining this witness. Like, what are they, this tennis match going back and forth, they're going to concede that point. And they'll remember that. So I think that's pretty interesting. As far as chronology, it's a little different. So I opened the book with Kerry, Jen, and Karen searching for John because I thought that was a poignant moment. But in terms of the chronology of understanding what is going to happen here, maybe you start somewhere else. I don't know. Jeff says he would save Kerry later because they didn't cross her. I'd let her testimony back up any cross of Jen McCabe. That's a good point to back up Jen McCabe because they do back each other up, and nobody's accusing Kerry of being part of the conspiracy. So, but I think it would be. I still lean towards thinking that Kerry is a good idea to get that emotional testimony and really, right from the start, show that Karen's behavior was suspicious. So why would Karen believe that John was dead and struck by a car? So that's pretty. You're going to get the jury right away thinking, this is kind of suspicious here. And then especially as they're going to layer in during the trial these clips of Karen, it's going to do a good job of really portraying Karen as a murderer. James, I have no doubt that Brennan knows what he's doing. He's obviously very experienced, incredibly capable, listed as one of the top lawyers in the country. So I'm not second guessing him in any way, but this, as part of a show, we can talk about these things because they're a way for us to learn. When we talk about these things, it helps us learn to think about these kind of strategies. The first officer on the scene was Saraf, and he did testify on the first day last year, and we saw his dash cam video. I think he had to come back and finish the second day too, to finish his testimony on the second day. Who will the defense call first? Who they called last time? They didn't have a lot of witnesses last time, so they got lucky. They got the ARCA guys. So. Hi, Melissa. while you're looking at this, I want to show you guys, while you guys are answering this, I want to show you guys something cool. If you can see it back here. Oh, how's this look? Makes me kind of look like a knight in shining armor, huh? Or not so shining. I finished my 10th day of radiation today. Yeah. And this is the thing. They make a mold of you and they put this over you. And then these things here lock you down. So they lock you down to the machine, basically. Yeah, it looks like a Monty Python character. So you're locked in there for 20 minutes. It's I was wondering if I'd be able to get through it because of my claustrophobia, but actually it's not that bad once you get used to it. So if anybody is facing this in their future, don't worry, you'll get through it. You'll get through it, guys. If I could get through it with my claustrophobia, you guys can get through it too. Laura's claustrophobic, yeah. So do you guys have any more thoughts or do you have any questions? Oh, so it's something else we can look at. Let me see it. Let me play this for you. I haven't listened to this yet. This is Grant had highlighted this on his thing. This is from Turtle Boy. Let me bring this in. Let's see. It was on X.
You can call me Journalism Jesus, and I plan on rising tomorrow from the dead. You guys don't know this. Tomorrow's Easter. Jesus is back with a vengeance. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, not to compare myself to Jesus or anything like that, but it's kind of similar. Like, getting nailed to the cross is much worse.
He's comparing himself to Jesus
than losing a Facebook page, but they're both obstacles. You know what I mean? And they thought Jesus was down for the count, and they thought I was down for the count. You know, and what are they doing? What happened with Jesus after that? Oh, rose from the dead. Literally started his own religion, one of the biggest religions in the world. There's a million sects of it now of Christianity that have been created. And yes, this is
what Turtle Boy sees, that many years from now, there will be the religion of turtleism.
You're right, yo. This is extremely disrespectful. I'm a devout Catholic, but I am extremely disrespectful. So if you want a respectful channel, you have come to the wrong place. It's about to get a million times more offensive than what I just said about comparing myself to Jesus. Okay, like a million times. So I would just log off, go watch something else. You'll be better off that way. Your feelings won't get hurt. There's a million ways to consume, can't read content. We don't have time for people like that over here.
So I was talking to one of my old partners from the channel and good friends today, and we were talking about that very thing. But I used to tell him 2 years ago that Turtle Boy wants to go to jail because he has a messianic complex heading in that direction, and he sees himself as a savior, kind of. He sees himself in that way, and we see him going down that road. Now he sees himself as the Messiah. So he will be sent to jail, and then he will rise from the dead more powerful than ever. It's insane. But it's been done before over and over and over again throughout human history by cult leaders who have narcissistic personalities. And I've also had a theory that I looked this up today. So I've always wondered, why is it that people are drawn, not all people, but some people are drawn into the orbits of the narcissist? And it turns out my suspicion was that there's a chemical reason for it. And so in our one of the hormones inside our body, you've heard of this, is called oxytocin. It's also known as the love hormone. It responsible for different things, but it helps. It is responsible for you falling in love, those kind of feelings. But it's more than that. It's responsible for those feelings of bonding that you feel with the other primates in your pack, or in our case, family members or people in our circle. But it's in all primates, and it's in all animals. And so with a pack animal, you have the alpha, and then it's important. And those humans are not pack animals in that way. We don't have alphas. We're not. It's not like that. But with gorillas, wolves, you have the alpha male, and the idea is for all the other males or animals in the pack to fall in line with the alpha. In order to make them fall in line, that oxytocin in their body makes them want to serve the alpha. And if you're born with more oxytocin receptors, everybody's born with a different amount of oxytocin receptors in their brain. If you're born with a lot, you're more likely to fall into this trap of wanting, where you're vulnerable to falling for a cult leader, because you have those receptors in your brain. So you see this guy worshiping himself, and you confuse that with alpha maleness. It comes across to you as the same thing. Someone that truly is so narcissistic that they just worship themselves. So there's always going to be a certain percentage of the public that is going to fall in line, and they're drawn to that, and they're going to worship him too. And so when I say that there is a mindless mob, there literally is, because a lot of those people they don't have full control over their minds. They're not able to see through the fact that they have these hormones that drive them to basically submit themselves to the will of the narcissist leader. And they can't see through that. They can't see through those hormones that are driving them. So it's not that they're dumb, it's that they're mindless because they're not in control of their own minds. Anyways. Lisa, thank you very much. Thank you for being here and for the support. Appreciate it. And Jeff Silvesi, thank you very much. I appreciate your support. So the Red Sox won again today. I was in Boston for the end of the marathon. I didn't see any of the marathon. I don't know who won. I assume a Kenyan won the marathon. And Karen was just on the glare. She said she's fighting for John. She is pushing that she's being framed. Look, in every single, yes, Kara, I watched the Celtics yesterday too. Yep, good start. In every single interview, in fact, she comes across as she hates John. She's angry at John, and she hates him. And I talked about that when the last time she filmed here, Terry, the producer of the documentary that Unsolved, Mysteries produced that we saw a body in the snow. And I mentioned that to her. I said, it seems clear to me that Karen is angry at John and hates him and blames him. And she says, oh, yes. Oh, yes. And Gretchen Voss, I had asked her the same thing, and she said the same thing. She said, yeah, it's apparent that she doesn't hide it. Karen is not someone that can hide her feelings. And she hates John O'Keefe. She blames John O'Keefe for this mess. Arca, if there is a hung jury again, will the Commonwealth retry Karen? I believe yes, but I know a lot of people doubt that. More and more people doubt that now. I believe it depends on, unless they poll the jury, we may not know the exact vote. But if this is a case where there's one juror that holds out, which I think it very well could be, then if that's the case, they're going to retry it because they're going to know. I mean, there's so much at stake here. It's not just obviously justice for John and justice for Karen. Big thing is the witness accused. So if you get a conviction of Karen, that means a lot to them. It clears them. But the other thing is the justice system itself. Are we, if you let Karen succeed in this, it establishes a precedent where someone can go out if they have the right ammunition in order to construct such a story, where someone can go out and build a narrative and pitch it to the public about a conspiracy, and they're going to fall for it. And as long as you get, and in the way more and more people are realizing that you jump on this bandwagon, the conspiracy bandwagon, you can grow a YouTube channel, you can grow your law profession, you can make can really benefit yourself if you have no integrity and don't care about the truth. And there's no shortage of people out there. There's no shortage of glarers out there. That's why I call him the grifter. It's a guy from out of state that just hopped onto this case just because he knew it was a way to grow his channel. That's it. Nothing more. That's what he is. And there's no shortage of guys like that. Guys that aren't too smart. They have a channel. And that's what's at stake here. Are you gonna let this precedent be established that you could subvert the justice system? You could subvert the jury system by having somebody on Turtle Boy in the courtroom, intimidating those jurors, threatening those jurors. So oh, okay. We'll check it out. Kim, thank you. Let's see. I don't know. Where'd you send it, Kim? I didn't get it yet. A clip of Karen on the glare. Oh, it just came through. Okay, I got it. Just came through. All right, let's set this up. Means I got to take my headphones back.
I feel stronger every day. I'm sick of this, but I don't feel weak, and I've gone this far, so just keep going.
You look strong.
Sorry, I just left there. Thank you.
You
Speak
look
up.
strong, and there's a lot more support to come as well. I mean, your story is getting out there. It's getting traction. People are seeing the injustice. People are seeing the corruption, and people with significant platforms are speaking out about it, and it's getting a lot of attention. And It's exactly
Yeah.
what is necessary, I think, is because you're taking on an entire local government. So who
To go back to Anonymous's article, as I was saying during that, this is what's going to happen a year, maybe even just a few months down the road. But the moral of the story is people are going to be wondering how we let these people trick us. The public is going to say, I mean, the evidence is so overwhelming. Yet you got all these people, she's managed to get these grifters here. The Glare, Melanie Little, and Bettero. They're grifters. They're pure, unadulterated grifters. They don't care about the truth. They're in this for themselves. They don't care about a fair trial, on justice, corruption. They could give a shit about any of that. They're in this for themselves. There's some way that they can benefit from it. And the conspiracy theory is so absurd, so absurd. That's going to be apparent to people as time goes by. And they're going to say, how were we ever fooled?
are the only people that they have to answer to than the people. And so you're getting that support, and it's the right thing. It's justice.
It is. Yep. Yep. It's bigger than me. It's not about me. I'm not even sure it's about me among the parties to this case. It's about power and just wanting to win, and the injustice is just hiding in plain sight. Everyone knows it.
The world is watching, and you have been the face of strength for so many people that are watching you, that it's overwhelming to see. I went there, I saw the love and outside and all the people that are rooting for you, because you really could be any one of us. And when you say it is so much bigger than you, you're right. It is so much bigger than you. This is about a system. It's about a corrupt system. And you're the one exposing it. And it's so horrific that you have to go through this and go through this again. And my heart breaks for you.
All right. That's absolutely enough of that. There's only so much anybody could take of Melanie Little. I mean, it's insane. Melanie, in the early weeks of the trial last year, saying that John's shoe was switched, that his belt was missing, his hat was missing, the socks, something else. Everything she reported always turns out to be wrong. Always. Now, if she was sincere, if she was after the truth, she might, after the trial, do some self-reflection and say, wow, a lot of the things that I thought just didn't turn out to be true. But she doesn't do any of that because she's not interested in the truth. She's purely grifting on this case. All right, just got a message there. All right, so yeah, black sole shoe versus the white sole shoe. I mean, it's just it's just maddening to think that people, for all the, as we went through the article with Anonymous early, it's just all the logic questions that come up in here, and you're like, people actually believe this. Real human beings, your neighbors, people that handle dangerous equipment, that might have your life in their hands. They work in hospitals. They believe this. But I mean, when you see Hank present Hank as from the text stream, from the new information stance and GPS, you're going to know exactly where John was at every second, and that he never went inside the house, and that he stepped out of the car, and then within a minute, Karen backed up into him. And that's it. It's game over. And once that's presented, there's nowhere else for these people to retreat to except for madness. We get into 9/11 truthism and stuff like that. You get into just insanity. It's becomes so divorced from reality. They don't need me to write. Hank does not need me to write an opening statement. Trust me. He's been doing this his whole life. He knows what he's doing. I'm not a lawyer, but I did a mock opening statement. He's obviously welcome to look at it. My opening was nuts and bolts. Nuts and bolts evidence establishes that Karen Reed struck John O'Keefe with her Lexus. Money is just it's not just money though, Foghorn. It's ambition for views and clicks, notoriety. I don't think, Turtle Boy's making a lot of money off this, but I don't think Turtle Boy's driven by money. He's driven by attention. He wants to be the center of attention. It's a messianic thing. He wants to be the center of a cult. It seems like at some point, Turtle Boy and Karen might turn on each other because you can't have two cult leaders. The light up sign at the yellow carded sales sign. Well, that was a gift. The dude abides. Where is the dude? He hasn't been around as much, but the dude abides sent me that. It was a very nice gesture. People have been very generous. Will the crowd be smaller? A lot of people have asked me that. I don't know. I can only tell you last year I went to the courthouse to meet Kate during jury selection, and there was only like 6 or 7 people there at that time. It was Rita and Tom CPU and a few other zombies. And so it was the same thing last year, limited crowd during jury selection. So we don't know. We'll see. I know the buffer zone is going to make it a lot tougher. YC t-shirts. Before this case, I did set up a t-shirt company, and I'm not a company. I'd set up where you could order t-shirts on, I forget what it is, t-shirts.com. It's still open. I never go there. The problem is all right. So Roberta, I don't watch her channel, but people point out when she's going after me. So the other couple weeks ago, she's going after me and she's saying Kevin's a grifter because he's got a book out on this. And as soon as she finished that, she literally put her line of t-shirts up there that said Karen Reed is guilty and all that stuff like that. No self-awareness. No self-awareness. You're hawking t-shirts that say Karen Reed is guilty for profit. But I'm a grifter because I wrote a book that I guarantee I'll never see a penny of. So, that's why I don't do the t-shirt thing, because maybe we'll do that after this case is over. I just don't like the look of you're trying to exploit this family's pain. So, and I don't really make any money off the t-shirts. Like you make like $1. So it's not about money, but it's in terms of the way it looks. It'll look to other people like it's grifty. So that's why I don't do it. Just reading to the comments. My very good friend Red Sky will keep her identity secret, since she likes to change it a lot. No, I'm not, but I just don't like the appearance of that when you put on the t-shirts. And of all my friends here, my oldest friend is Deb Martell, because that goes back. I knew Deb when she wasn't even 21 yet, and I wasn't 21 yet. So Deb agrees. She said it makes it too much like a sporting event. So yeah, just like the same thing. Sometimes someone will say, "You're the leader of the anti-Karen movement." No, I'm not. There's no leader of this movement. We are not a mindless mob. We are independent thinkers. I'm just happen to have a channel. Not everybody has time to set up a channel. So I have a channel, I have a mic, I have a camera, so I can go on and talk about it. But no, I am not the leader. We all have our own minds our own opinions. We differ on things. I don't expect people to agree with me 100%. You think for yourself, and that's how it is. Laura says, I know you're not religious, but let's pray for Hank and John's family tomorrow and that we have a fair-minded jury. Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. Look, I got these pillows here. Imagine having to sit in those chairs like John's poor parents have to for all these weeks. So you're sitting on court benches. It just sucks what they've had to go through. I remember drinking vodka and cheap Kool-Aid mix with Debbie and her friends in the dorm, Dodd Hall at Clark University. That's how long I go back with Deb. And Deb, I talked to Steve Fieldman a couple weeks ago. He's a judge, by the way, out in Colorado. Our old friend Steve. Tom Fleming has a mock draft? No, I did not know he had a mock draft already. Really drafting a kicker in the second round? That beats even Belichick. I think Belichick took Goskowski in the fourth round, and that's really high for a kicker. So, Pat, the draft night, as I told Tom, is Steve was originally from San Diego, yeah, but he lives in Colorado now. The draft night, the draft show is up in the air. So I have a 9-hour chemo followed by a 9-hour chemo day Friday. So I may not feel up to doing an NFL show Saturday night. Thursday night. If I'm feeling all right, I'll come on for a little while to do it, especially where the Patriots draft 4. So maybe we can do a quick show, but not like the usual long show where we sit here drinking and having fun. But it's a big week. The start of the Karen Reed trial and the NFL draft. Dr. Russell, I presume, will be in Canton sometime during the week of May 12th. That's when Court TV is going to be there. So reach out if you want to get together. I'll let you know. Yeah, Jude, the first 2 days are loading days. And then after that, the subsequent treatments are like 3 hours. But the first days, they have to monitor you to make sure you're not having a reaction to anything. But it's actually really optimistic in that, in addition to the regular chemo, they'll be giving me an antibody drug that was only approved 6 months ago and was designed for my particular cancer. Now, when I got the targeted therapy, which is a little different, that I had been on for the last 6.5 years, that had only been approved 6 months before then. And that gave me 6.5 years. Not only 6.5 years of, it gave me 6.5 years of healthy, good life. I was able to go to the gym every day, go on vacation. I even played basketball with Tom Fleming and his family. So that was a miraculous drug, but we knew it wasn't going to last forever, but I got more than my share of it. I was very lucky. So I'm hoping that I will get out of this other new antibody drug that was only approved 6 months ago, something similar will happen. And so you keep hope alive, right? And so I'm pretty optimistic that maybe I'll be lucky again. I'm not lucky in gambling, but I've been lucky in cancer drugs. Melissa, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And gonna be a long week. And so I'm trying to figure out that so Court TV wants me to be live in, let's call it studio. I don't know what location they've selected in Dedham, Monday through Friday, every night. I'm going to try. I don't, from talking to people, I'm expected to be pretty tired at that time, but maybe the energy of doing this will help me get through it. So, and the energy of talking to you guys. But then a lot of you guys are going to try to beat me there, trying to talk Thomas Fleming into going. Arca, I have not been following that trial or really any other trial, to tell you the truth. Patricia had to pause reading the book to watch this. Well, I hope you get to the end of the book, Patricia. Let me know what you thought. The end was a little rushed, but it was still kind of important to me, the ending. The last couple of chapters where I go into, there's a rooftop garden in MGH. I didn't even know. Which building, Deb? There's a whole complex of buildings there. And they're building a new one there. They're building a new, and I think the canceled unit is going into the new skyscraper that they're building there. Yeah, no, I do, and I didn't even see Rose. Rose, I didn't if she asked, but Rose, I appreciate the thought, but no, I'm not looking for any money. Don't worry about it. I don't need any money. The money that comes in, the donations I use to do projects related to the case, but that's it. There's a certain amount of expense that goes with the channel, so I wanted just enough money to come in to take care of the expense, and what's left over we try to use for projects related to this case. But enough money's coming in. Don't worry about it. So please don't feel like, where they do the chemo. Well, I'm getting the chemo done in the Yawkey building. Like this, I think, because I think there's other chemo stations in MGH. Oh, okay, all right. Sorry, Rose, I misunderstood what was in there. Okay, yeah. Lunder was where I had the where I've been the last 10 days getting the radiation. It's down at they put the radiation down where it's safe. It's 3 stories below. Yeah, Yawkey building, that's where I go for my treatments. That's where I go for my doctor too. So I didn't know they had a garden on the roof. I've never been up. My doctor's on the 7th floor, so I think there's only 9 floors or something, right? So I don't know. It's oh man, what a great place to work. Well, it's so hard. I mean, there was a kid in there today. It's just awful. But the view of the Boston skyline is tremendous from Yawkey. It really is. It's amazing, the view. You can see the State House, like from the waiting room where my doctor's office is. You can see the Golden Dome of the State House. You can see a very good view of the north of not the north end of Beacon Hill. The Mummy? No, I haven't seen the Mummy. Thank you, Foghorn. Every bit helps, right? So. Connected to the old Charles Street jail. Yep. Charles Street jail. There's some beautiful buildings in Boston. So many. I love all those older brick buildings like that, the old jails, and you also got the Longfellow Bridge right there. I mean, it's, you drive by the Hat Shell going in. The trees are starting to, most of the trees now have small leaves on them, really just in the last few days. The cherry blossom trees are still full of white leaves. It looks really beautiful right now in Boston. All right, so it's pretty much time to call this a night so I can get up early in the morning and get this going. Any last question? Any last comment? Anything really important somebody wants to say? Yeah, the cherry blossoms don't last long. I assume you lost your mom, Kim, and I'm sorry about that. That's a difficult experience to go through. Last call for an alcohol. That's something I used to yell at many times at the Blarney Stone. Last call. All right, guys. So that just about wraps it up then. Thank you to Thomas Fleming and thank you to Joe for the great job moderating. This is a really good community here. And Melissa, thank you. We'll see you in the morning. Debbie, good to see you, my old friend. And Dr. Russell, I hope you're warming up for your testimony. Gene Doctors made it in late. Hi, Gene. Good night, Rose, and good night, Lisa. All right, guys. We did this, and tomorrow.